Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and the Fool.
So, the Great Pyramids. So I'd like to start with the, what's that? There's a wall in one of the Inca cities, former Inca cities, called Sarcophagi something. I don't remember what it's called.
Alright.
But this wall, it looks
Have
like...
we been there?
No, it's in Peru.
Oh, these are Incan, right? Sorry,
Yeah.
not Mayan?
Not Mayan, yeah.
Or Aztec?
Yeah. So it's a wall, you've probably seen pictures of it, of these giant, like, multi-ton stones, all interlocking. They've got, like...
That's the very fine you can't slip a piece of
Yeah,
paper.
they look like puzzle pieces,
Yeah.
essentially, all put together. And they're very smooth and bulbous. They don't have signs of chisel marks or tools on them. It almost looks like they are molded into place.
Yeah.
Or at least they're really old and it's been worn away. Although some people claim that it doesn't look...
The Japanese building style, they don't use nails.
Hmm.
Their woodworking, their original, because they had to use wooden nails and stuff, they literally carve pillars. So you'd put them into place, and then you just hit something, and they'd actually fasten together, and so they're just held.
That's how wooden floors work. They're just interwoven, essentially.
Yeah, so manage doing that, though, with a whole building. That's how
Yeah.
the old Japanese building style was done.
You hit it just right, just...
Well, I mean, they basically, like those deadbolt locks, which if you mess up, it'll permanently lock the thing.
Hmm.
That's basically their construction work.
Yeah. Yeah, so these giant interlocking stones,
Yeah.
that is a style you see elsewhere in the world. You can see it, I believe, in Egypt in some places. And I think the Mayans did some stuff similar too. Not quite as fine. The Mayan stuff looks like it was carved, but...
Yeah.
but
And the Aztec stuff, I mean, it's old and weathered, so not exactly certain.
yeah, but it's... the Inca stuff in particular is interesting because the stones are so large, they would be difficult or impossible to move today.
Yeah.
So there is a huge question of how did the Mayans do this? There's also stones in Siberia, I believe, that form walls like that. But the question there is, in Siberia, are they natural or not?
Yeah.
Because they might just be cracks, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So that all around the world you see stuff like this, although the Inca one is the one that I think we have a pretty good understanding that it was built, and it's quite impressive. Because we're not sure how they did it, and now what I say here, this is interesting because a lot of alternate archaeologist types say that humans don't know how to do this. They don't know how to do this today, right? You can often find people that know how to do it.
Oh yeah, old Jebediah. He can move your old barn without you noticing.
Yeah. There's a guy in the States that...
Yeah, that's who I was referring to.
Yeah, he can move barns. He built a Stonehenge on his own. There was the Coral Castle in the States. A guy built a castle on his own, just on a normal income without anything fancy. He built an entire castle.
There's that guy in Spain. Know that giant cathedral?
Yeah. Yeah, this is the Coral Castle.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that guy was Spanish, not American.
No, he based on the Spanish temple, I believe.
Oh, that they're still building.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
I don't know. Anyways. Or maybe he was British. Anyways. There are... Another thing I saw was the Obsidian Sarcophagus. No, it's not Obsidian, sorry. The Black Sarcophagus in Egypt. It has very fine cut corners.
Yeah.
And people are saying there's no way a person even today could do this sort of precision. And I saw a comment on that video saying, yeah, I'm a stone worker and we can do this sort of stuff. We use our laser tools and diamond cutters and we can do it no problem. So it can be... A lot of the stuff can be done.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is this guy says he uses laser precision things and diamond cutters, which maybe the Egyptians had, but...
Have you seen this statue? It's one of the Leonardo or one of those guys' marble statues, where it's a woman holding her skirt and she's like pulling the silk dress, and it actually looks like she's pulling cloth with her fingers, and it's all carved in marble.
No, but I've seen other of like Michelangelo stuff where it's really impressive.
Well, like the guy's arm, you can see like the muscles and veins in it. Yeah, so that one's pretty good. But I think my favorite is just woman's like she's wearing a dress, and he's actually showing her like manipulating the dress on her body.
There are very talented people out there.
That's what I was saying. Like maybe you could carve the Blackstone thing if you're just insanely talented.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I think is really discounted a lot of the time. is people like Archimedes,
Yeah.
where these people emerge who are able on their own to do everything that it would take a generation over 100 years to accomplish.
Well, who's that inventor who had the mirror? He got killed because he's scribbling on the floor. And he's like, don't disturb my patterns. And he apparently had the mirrors that would light the ship.
Yeah, Archimedes.
Oh, is that Archimedes?
Yeah, and he had the giant claw that could flip things upside down. He invented calculus.
Mythbusters tried to...
Though they did a terrible job.
Yeah, they did a terrible job. But, like, not only on top they did a terrible job, like, he might have had something that they didn't even know about to extent with those mirrors.
But I think a high school class that's poorly disciplined versus an entire disciplined army with specially designed mirror shields is an entirely different story.
Like, you could even design each mirror shield to be its own focus, and then they concentrate to focus.
Yeah, I don't think the Mythbusters gave it a fair shot.
There's that thing you can do, which is if you have old television, you can take that lens out of it and get a giant magnifying glass, and if you focus it at rocks, it can make the rocks explode. It, like, melts them and, like, send pieces out of them.
Yikes.
And so, like, the concentrated power of the sun can destroy rocks.
That's actually another aspect of the the Inca wall, is that a lot of it appears to be vitrified, like turned to glass.
Yeah.
So they seem to not only be able to move these giant stones in some way that we're not aware of, but they also got them very hot somehow. And now, here's just a theory off the top of my head. Maybe there's some plant goo, let's say, like aloe vera. You smear it on a stone, and the crystals in the aloe vera are polarized in such a way that they shatter rock. And then all you do is you stick a layer on, you wait a day, you scrape off the shattered rock, and you just keep doing that. Something like that could give you the effect. How do you lift the rock? I don't know, but maybe someone could figure it out, like an Incan Archimedes.
Well, remember that the science kits we had as a kid? I made that substance that would turn paper into the same material as egg cartons. And I was never able to make that again. I have no idea why I did, but I mixed some stuff together, you'd splash on paper, and the paper would, like, wrinkle up and gain some mass from the chemicals, and basically imitation egg carton.
Yeah, so something to keep in mind about, it's said that we don't know how they made Greek fire.
Yeah.
That's true. That doesn't mean we can't make Greek fire. It means we know about 10 ways to make Greek fire, and we don't know which ones the Greeks
It's
used.
the same with the steel. Damascus steel.
Yeah.
We make steel that's actually stronger than Damascus steel.
We make hardened steel. Yeah. I was reading about hardened steel. Holy cow. That's the stuff they make like snowplow blades out of.
Yeah.
And a guy was saying how they work with it, and they make dies for casting other metal tools like screwdrivers and whatnot. Yeah. And in order to carve it, you need like a sapphire drill bit that costs like $100. And the drill bit wears out in about 3 minutes. And then you have to switch it out for another one. He said this stuff costs like thousands of dollars to make a die out of it. Like, it is so expensive to work with.
It's cool that sapphire is actually like a useful tool.
But you have to spend like hundreds of dollars a minute just to slightly carve this stuff. Yeah. It's so tough. It's ridiculous. Because I guess it's like it's almost diamond, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah.
So, the prevailing idea is that we don't know how the Incas did it, let's say.
Yeah.
And the pseudo-archaeologist take is that they had a technology we don't have access to still, potentially. Okay. So, I just wanted to start with that to give an idea of the grandeur of the past of Egypt and the Incas.
Yeah.
But the Incas said they didn't build it. They said it was the people before them that built it. So...
I bet they were doing that just to screw with the conquistadors.
So in the past, there was a great civilization type, like the Egyptians, for example. Obviously, a great civilization in the past. Yes. So I just want to have that in mind to begin with. And then I want to talk about you said in a few episodes ago how maybe humans can't actually discover anything they haven't already discovered. So in Egypt, there is a building called Edfu, which is a temple. Yeah. And it was the it was the archives for all the Egyptian knowledge they had before the flood.
Yeah.
if the flood existed, which it seems pretty likely some sort of flood did. So this was the place where they stored all the knowledge they had managed to keep. But thousands of years passed.
Yeah.
So the Egyptians slowly lost these scrolls, and they would burn them for firewood, the people that came in there, or they would steal them, or they would break, they'd wear out, whatever it might be. So I think it's empty. Like, I don't know if there's anything left in there. But what the priests did was they translated a bunch of stuff, and they carved it onto the walls on the inside of this temple. And so we still have what they consider to be the most important stuff carved on there. But it's kind of weird because it's like really old Egyptian to the point where it's hard to translate today.
Yeah.
And the Egyptians might have been translating even older stuff that they didn't fully understand. So it's pretty hard to actually understand what it was meant to be in the first place, which is unfortunate because the whole point was to preserve it. But there is one thing where they talk about how the 7 sages, which are figures that are seen all around the world in many different mythologies, were the only divine beings who knew how the temples and sacred places were created. And the 7 sages themselves were the creators of knowledge, which thereafter could only be passed on but not invented anew. So the 7 sages, thousands upon thousands of years ago, invented knowledge.
Yeah.
And every point since then has just been people passing it on, rediscovering what the sages invented, which it does feel very similar to what you said, I thought.
Yeah. Well, there's also that whole parallel in the thing about trying to know the same amount that God knows, and that gets you closer to the divine. I can't remember it. But it's basically there's like the universe is a ton of mysteries, and by learning as many of those as you can, you get closer to God because God's everything.
Right. And
I can't completely remember, but it's basically like there's not all knowledge is already created. So.
Right. Oh, and so trying to learn, learn the knowledge God has already bestowed.
Yeah, maybe God's the 7th sage. Like it's just another translation of that thought. Although there's that one line which is, at the beginning of the universe, God created 1,000,000 questions and only 10,000 answers.
So there is Thoth, the god of wisdom.
Yeah.
He wrote 42 books, which he hid around the earth, that contained all his knowledge.
Yeah.
Different subjects in each book, from what I understand.
42 is divisible by 7.
And these books, if you find them, will bestow upon you the knowledge of Thoth. Or Thoth.
Yeah.
However it's pronounced. And that could also be the discovery of God's wisdom in the world, as you said. So Thoth gave a bit of a prophecy. I think it was Thoth. This is from Asclepius III, or book 3. And now this book doesn't exist anymore, because most books don't anymore, right? Because we've lost most knowledge that we ever had. So most stuff, when we read about books from the ancient past, what has happened is we'll find like Herodotus and Cicero and Pliny, and they'll quote books.
Yeah.
And then we'll take all those quotes and compile them.
Yeah.
And we'll say, okay, so this is what was in that book. And
then sometimes people just condense it as well.
Yeah, there'll be people that rewrite them. They'll like, this book was about this, and it said this and this and this. So we've lost most of the books, but we have references and quotes to them. So this is a quote from someone else's record of it. But this is what Thoth said, the sort of founder of Egypt, the people that gave them wisdom. He said, "There's worse to come. Egypt herself will have yet more to suffer. She will fall into a far more piteous plight, and will be infected with yet more grievous plagues. And this land, which was once holy, a land which loved the gods, and wherein alone, in reward for her devotion, the gods deigned to sojourn upon the earth, a land which was the teacher of mankind in holiness and piety, this land will go beyond all in cruel deeds. The dead will far outnumber the living, and the survivors will be known for Egyptians, by their tongue alone, but in their actions they will seem to be men of another race. O Egypt, Egypt, of thy religion nothing will remain but an empty tale, which thine own children in time will come not to believe. Nothing will be left but graven words, and only the stones will tell of thy piety. And in that day men will be weary of life, and they will cease to think the universe worthy of reverent wonder and of worship. And so religion, the greatest of all blessings, for there is nothing, nor has been, nor ever shall be, that can be deemed a greater boon, will be threatened with destruction. Men will think it a burden, and will come to scorn it. They will no longer love this world around us, this incomparable work of God, this glorious structure which he has built, this sum of good made up of things of many diverse forms, this instrument whereby the will of God operates in that which he has made, ungrudgingly favoring man's welfare, this combination and accumulation of all the manifold things that can call forth the veneration, praise, and love of the beholder. Darkness will be preferred to light, and death will be thought more profitable than life, and no one will raise his eyes to heaven. The pious will be deemed insane, and the impious wise. The madman will be thought a brave man, and the wicked will be esteemed as good. As to the soul, and the belief that it is immortal by nature, or may hope to attain immortality, as I have taught you, all this they will mock at, and will even persuade themselves that it is false. No word of reverence or piety, no utterance worthy of heaven and of the gods of heaven, will be heard or be believed. And so the gods will depart from mankind, a grievous thing, and only evil angels will remain, who will mingle with men, and drive the poor wretches by main force into all manner of reckless crime, into wars and robberies and frauds, and all things hostile to the nature of the soul. Then will the earth no longer stand unshaken, and the sea will bear no ships. Heaven will not support the stars in their orbit, nor will the stars pursue their constant course in the heaven. All voices of the gods will of necessity be silenced and dumb. The fruits of the earth will rot, the soil will turn barren, and the very air will sicken in sullen stagnation. After this manner will old age come upon the world. Religion will be no more. All things will be disordered and awry. All good will disappear.
So, one thing I picked out from that, I mean, it's pretty dark. They said religion. It wasn't the Egyptian faith. It was just religion.
And it was the idea of worshipping the soul and immortality will become mocked. Yeah. And wise men will be considered... Well, pious men will be considered insane. So and wise men, Sam Harris, will be...
There's this poll done of... so it was polling atheists and religious people. And so you have a button. And if you press the button... all people become atheist. That's basically the premise of it. So, poll among the atheists was overwhelmingly atheists would press the button to make everyone else atheists. And then, like, a small amount of them said no.
Really?
And then amongst the religion people, it was a very, very small amount said they would press the button. And then the majority of the religious people said, no, I would not press that button. And then in the total population, it was there'd be more religious... there's more non-pushing the button than pushing it when you combine the two together.
Right.
But among the atheists, that's
messed up.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an atheist, but that's messed up. Why would you do that? Like, are you so arrogant that you think you can strip away all meaning from someone else's life and think that's a good thing? As if you know that you are correct? Like, you could be totally wrong, and all you're doing is destroying the world.
Yeah.
That is not a button that should be pressed. The religious people are the only hope the world has, and you better hope and pray they're correct. As an atheist, you better hope and pray. That's messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some really wacky atheists out there, like Richard Dawkins. Sam Harris, who, I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast or not, but he's demonstrated that he worships the state.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about it a bit.
He substituted the state for God, which is what Dostoevsky said would happen.
Yeah. Well, who's the guy you said before, Sam Harris?
Richard Dawkins.
He's funny the way he's gone. Do you know about this at all?
Don't think so.
He's basically saying we need to go back to the church or ideas like it.
Oh.
And he's still not religious, but he's saying humanity needs things like this. Like, he's starting to move more and more towards that.
Wow.
Because he's
He's fallen more in line with Stephen Fry.
Yeah, he's realized
Well, I think
the importance of ritual.
Well, it's interesting. Richard Dawkins and Terry Pratchett, who I think are basically the same age. Yeah. And I think they were... No, Richard Dawkins was friends with Douglas Adams. Yeah. I don't know if he knew Terry Pratchett or not. But I'm going to use Richard Dawkins and Terry Pratchett. Both very smart guys. Both very great in what they've done.
Yeah.
In not just biology, but in atheism and in writing, right?
Yeah.
But they were tearing down the world around them without knowing why it was there in the first place.
Yeah.
And Terry Pratchett, it's especially obvious with the fact that he destroyed fairy tales. Like, well, why does a witch have to be evil? Why does a witch have to be female? This sort of thing. Because that, if you don't know, that doesn't mean you get to destroy it. Yeah. And now you see the world. You see the world which you created now, where nothing has meaning.
Well,
and then Terry Pratchett also spoke very highly in favor of assisted suicide.
Yeah.
And now assisted suicide is more mainstream. All the things he said would never come to pass are starting to come to pass. Like in Oregon, there was the case where the insurance company said, "We can't afford your insurance, but we will pay for your healthcare, but we will pay for suicide."
Yeah.
And in Canada, you told me that assisted suicide is the 6th leading cause of death. However, I looked it up, and I didn't look it up very much, so this could be wrong. But it was debunked. So I read the debunk, right? So, as all debunks, it's absolutely 100% false. Because if you change the definition of cause of death, it doesn't become the 6th leading cause of death. So what doctors do is they don't consider assisted suicide a form of death. They consider you dying from the disease that caused you to want the assisted suicide. So assisted suicide is the means of death, but the cause of death is the disease that led you to seek the suicide.
So that debunk just made the whole thing much more evil.
Sort of.
Hiding things in words like that is evil.
But that's what all debunks do. I don't know if you've ever seen like Snopes or any of these sites. That's all they do.
No, I just don't really care for debunks. To
it's
be
pointless
honest.
If someone shows you like, oh, this is debunked. It's well, no. It all they do is say 100% false, and then they say 99% true. That's all they do. And so I don't know the case if it's the 6th leading cause of death or not, because I didn't bother. That wasn't really what I was researching in general, but I was just kind of curious. But the fact that they had to lie on their debunk makes me think that it probably is.
I still say it's a good thing.
They're pushing death on people, and here's why it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because there is no God, and therefore we want to end this suffering as quickly as possible. But if there's no God, surely you'd want to keep in the light as long as possible. I don't know.
Every moment of suffering's better than the infinite void.
Maybe it depends on the level of suffering, I think.
Yeah.
But for most people's suffering, I think there's hope, at least, right? As long as you're alive. But I think Thoth, he was very prescient. And now, given he didn't give it time, he might have been thinking millions of years or hundreds of years. So eventually, of course, Egypt's going to fade from memory. So Thoth, sure, fair enough. But the fact that all that will remain is written on the stones, and even our religion will be forgotten. There will be people still called Egyptians, but their actions will be like that of men of another race.
Yeah.
You know how I said Dostoevsky, he was like the first person to point out the death of God? It's like Thoth pointed this out. The Edfu text, I think, it's like a minimum they're 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
And some people think they're much older than that.
The pyramids are, 6,000 years old?
Maybe? 5,000 is the mainstream.
Okay.
But the less mainstream is more like 10,000 years old.
Okay. Sorry. Civilization is 6,000 years old.
No, civilization is about 12,000 years old.
Is it really 12?
Yeah.
Where are we defining as the start then? Because I'm thinking of the city of Ur.
Yeah.
That's 12?
Well, Göbekli Tepe is 12,000 years old. City of Ur is maybe 10,000 years old.
Oh, I thought the city of Ur was 6,000. Okay.
The pyramids, Khufu was around 5,000 years ago.
I mean, where I consider the start of civilization, I guess, is also like it was where you consider it. I consider the Star Civilization the first grain silo.
Well, then you'd have to go to at least Göbekli Tepe, because they had grain.
Okay, yeah.
Which is 12,000 years ago.
Right. That's when I consider the Star Civilization is the first grain silo.
But the question there is, we don't know, right? Because I showed you the graph of the Younger Dryas event, right?
Yeah.
That was such a devastating event that there could have been a civilization equivalent to ours right now before that.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't know. And because the last 200,000 years or so have been really rough, like they've been ice age, just up and down temperature like crazy.
Yeah.
Except for the last 12,000 years. So the last 12,000 years have been very nice and very warm. Before that, it was all over the place. Human civilization could have risen and fallen dozens of times in that. And we might not know, depending on the level of devastation that caused us to disappear or fall back.
How long has the Homo sapien been around?
That is thought to be 300,000 to 500,000 years.
All right.
And in correlation with, I don't know if you ever saw Bob Gimlin's video about parallel species, or species living at the same time.
I think I've seen it.
He points out how incredibly unlikely it is for only a single human species to be alive at one time.
Yeah.
Like, he shows all of history, and there's like a dozen alive at every time. And then he says, but for the last 12,000, 50,000 years, there's only been one? That seems a little unlikely. That's his video. And I haven't read the book yet, but Denisovan Origins suggests that the Denisovans were alive as early as 12,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And they could have been the giants in the Bible that gave human knowledge.
Nephilim.
Yeah.
Actually, interesting on that subject, Bob Gimlin. So, the Survivor Man, he did a Bigfoot Encounters little series.
Yes.
And one of the guys he met, he's going through all the different angles of people talking. So, like spiritualism, big monkeys, something slightly different. One of the guys he encountered had a completely different approach, and he called them Nephilim because they're these misshapen giants.
Well, it does seem to... I think there is not a huge amount of reason to discount myths as not being true in some sense.
Yeah.
The extent to which they're true and the extent to which they're metaphorical is up for debate.
As much as we can know with history, Hercules was a general.
Hmm.
He was a very powerful general in Greece. And so the stories use his name anyways, of Hercules.
Isn't Hercules also like the guy that got rid of the giants or something? Or was it a...
Well, there's a problem with Greek mythology, or Greek history, is like it's close to mythology as it is. Because the Siege of Troy, there's actually a city that's been pinpointed of where Troy was. This siege happened. And this whole area of Greece, and during this time, I think it's about a 200-year period, we know nothing about. It's like this blip in time, which is, so the Mycenaeans and the Minoans lived in the same area. One of them kicked out the other. And the one that was before the other group on this island is also one of these situations where we knew they were there, but basically their whole culture was erased by the group that came after them.
Yeah, we don't know much about the Minoans at all.
Yeah. And so, like the Aurochs.
We don't even know what they were called.
Yeah.
We just called them the Minoans because they had statues everywhere of cows.
Yeah, and they had the Aurochs.
Yeah.
But, so there's this whole period of Greek history which is just gone. And so, in that period, like a lot of looking into it as much as we can. So, the Siege of Troy happened in this period, where a bunch of states staying together to attack one giant city. Hercules is from this period. There's other Greek heroes are sort of from this time frame historically.
So the Inca were asked who built these walls.
Yeah.
That I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And the Inca said to the Spanish, giants.
Yeah.
And you see that everywhere, that giants built this, giants built this, giants built this. And if the Denisovans, let's say, were a civilization roughly equivalent to ours today,
Yeah.
and they'd made all these things, and then they died out, you would get a result very similar to what we have today.
Yeah.
We have this mystery of this lost civilization with these stories of giants, these buildings that we can't build even to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And...
Well, if we were 12,000 years ago, I guess. So 12,000 years in the future, humanity at its current state is wiped out.
Yeah.
I've talked to our dad about this, and he's basically saying, if we have like an apocalyptic event, we're not going to be able to restart because we've used up all the coal and easy to get iron. And...
Well, that's an interesting point, actually. How did they make the pyramids without leaving fossil fuel marks everywhere, let's say?
Yeah.
Well, if we've used up all the fossil fuels, what did they use up?
Well, some of my thoughts are...
They used up all the Egyptian gaudium.
Yeah. Well, but on the apocalypse for us, I think there's always another lane to producing work for people. I don't think, like, if we don't have coal to burn...
There's also so much coal.
Yes.
We still have tons of coal.
Yeah. Well, it's all the easy accessible coal that's on the ground, and the other thing is the easy accessible iron.
Yeah.
However, if civilization collapses, there's easy accessible iron in these giant buildings that are full of metal wire.
So, you know what I was thinking?
But, just to continue mine. So if our civilization collapsed, and 2,000 years later, what do we have that be left over that we'd actually see of our buildings and our constructs? Like, would there be these fields of glass, or would that be worn down?
So there is a... I'll get into that in a moment, actually. Relatedly, I did wonder... Our rules about the world are based on observation.
Yeah.
So, for example, quartz and gold appear together. We don't know why gold forms, but it tends to form near quartz. Now, what if that isn't natural? What if what we're looking at is ancient civilizations used to house their gold in quartz structures?
Yeah.
I was walking along some cliffs and I was thinking, what if these are ancient walls? And what we know about the formation of cliffs is completely wrong because we're just studying walls that people built or teleported in or moved or whatever it might be. Our natural rules for the world could be determined. So what would be left, as you asked, is a very hard question to answer because we could be staring right at exactly what they already left. Mountains might not be real. We've never seen a mountain just form, right? So a mountain could be a statue of an ancient civilization, and the world used to be flat. Now, based on the way our civilization evolved, what would be left would be carbon emissions in the soil.
Yeah.
So you could take or an ice. Sorry, you could take a core sample from a glacier.
Yeah.
And you would notice a giant bump in carbon, or you would do a layer sample and you'd find an area in the past.
Would we also have hot spots of like giant bubbles of radiation from bombs?
I don't know if they would really register compared to like volcanoes and meteors and stuff. Maybe they would, because when they did all the nuclear testing, that is a slight blip.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's noticeable if you're not looking for it, because what it does do is it throws off our carbon dating.
Yeah.
But they might just think the world's slightly older than it is, rather than it actually being detectable. But maybe it is detectable. So what's interesting is there was some scientists that thought of that question. How do you detect a civilization that hasn't been there? And they said, well, you'd look for a massive, inexplicable increase over the course of 200 years or less of CO2 emissions.
Yeah.
That, like a massive increase that doesn't seem to be volcanic in origin. And they're like, okay, that seems like a pretty good thing. So let's go looking for one. And they found one in like the Cretaceous area, or like the dinosaurs. And they're like, well, don't know what that is.
Gassy dinosaurs.
But it was certainly, and I don't know if fossil fuels are the answer for every civilization that ever emerges.
Well, even on that, like, we've got these giant pits, and some of them might collapse, and like there'll be erosion and stuff. But they're like the salt mines we have, and like some of those uranium mines in the Canadian Shield, like boring those huge pits. They will be left over to extent.
Maybe.
Yeah.
They might just fill in.
I guess. Might be an inexplicably deep pond.
Yeah, round lake, or they might just fill with silt and not be noticed.
Well, like a round lake, though, that goes down for a quarter of a kilometer.
Yeah. Well, there's lakes in Africa that are like, they're like sideways rivers. They're, like, one of them's like a kilometer deep, and it's quite wide too, but relative to its, it's like this skinny, incredibly deep.
Wouldn't it be sad if Oak Islands we screwed up more on them than we even thought? Because like, oh, it's Templar treasure or whatever. But it's like Devastovan archive.
Well, what about the blue holes in South America? They're these perfectly round.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking about before.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking like Oak Islands, like, what if it's the Devastovan archives?
And the other question is, would they have buildings everywhere, like the pyramids? And we just think that they're much earlier than they are.
Yeah.
So, the pyramids, let's say, what if they are 140,000 years old? Like, just hypothetically.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone thinks they are, but if they are. Because there isn't really ways... So, I made a mistake when I was talking about the Earth drift theory, how do you date stone? There ways you can date stone, theoretically, I don't know, I just thought of a way, is oxidization on the surface, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, it's newly created, and then you compare its insides to its outsides, and its outsides, in theory, would be more oxidized than its insides. Yes. And if that is at a predictable rate, you can roughly date the stone, I would imagine.
Yeah.
The problem with cut stone is you can't do the same thing, because it could have been cut or recut at any point.
Yeah.
So there is a method for dating, which is really cool. I have no idea how it works. Stone structures that we have only recently, which is you can somehow tell, apparently, the last time a bit of stone saw light. So what you do is you fit the tool in between some bricks in the pyramids, let's say, and you say, yep, okay, so this brick, the last time it saw light was like 5,000 years ago. Because it absorbed a certain amount of light and then it decays at a predictable rate, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
So that is one way you can sort of predict it, I guess. But that only tells you about that brick. Like, maybe that was a repair. Maybe someone took it out and put it back like 100 years later. Because you reset it the moment it sees light.
Yeah.
Maybe like an Arab just took a flashlight and like in the 1500s and just looked in and completely ruined the whole thing. Shoved the torch between the cracks. So maybe if someone picked up the pyramids, put them back down, did a bit of dusting, So it totally throws it off.
Is there anything below the pyramids?
Yes, there's natural caverns, and then there's tunnels into those caverns.
I was kind of hoping there's inverse pyramids.
Well, it is kind of interesting that the pyramids are built on top of... they're very heavy.
Yeah.
And they're built on top of caves. It doesn't seem the most secure. So as to the nature of the pyramids, which I've been wanting to talk about for ages.
The premise that we'll get into.
They are, I think, the most advanced structure on Earth.
Big pile of rocks?
Yes. So, I want you to imagine two lines, right? One is a latitude line, which means it goes horizontally around the Earth.
Huh.
And this line crosses the most possible land it can.
Okay.
So...
It has to be at the equator, right?
No, because there's ocean.
All right, land.
Yeah,
That's in dirt. Okay.
Yeah. And then imagine a longitudinal line. This is vertical.
Yeah.
That also crosses the most possible land.
Yeah.
All right, now imagine the point, well, there's two, I guess, where they intersect.
Yeah.
So, that point, 30 degrees longitude, 31 degrees latitude, is where originally one of the main proponents, when they were making longitude and latitude, he said should be 0 degrees longitude, because it was the point where it was essentially the center of the world. It was where the most land was on Earth, like where you could travel for the furthest distance in any direction.
Yeah.
So he said this is where it should be, and that was the second place contender for what should be 0 degrees longitude. What they ended up deciding on was Greenwich, because that was the main trade port on Earth. So they said this is where everyone comes to. So it's not the place that's easiest to leave from, but it's the place everyone comes to. So that's where 0 degrees longitude will be, because it was the biggest port on Earth.
Yeah.
But that point, 3031, or 3130, I can't remember which way around it is, that's where the pyramids are.
Mm-hmm.
They're at the center of the Earth, which is quite an interesting coincidence.
Yeah.
So the pyramids they're aligned exactly north-south, not magnetic north-south. So magnetic north-south, you could use a compass. But true north, they point to true north, which is a little bit harder because you have to, well, in some ways it's easier because you can use the sun or astrology, but they deviate only by something like 0.6 of a degree from true north-south.
Yeah.
Which is quite the coincidence. If you take the Great Pyramid...
They're in a line?
No.
So I always thought it was like boop, boop, boop. Sort of thing.
So the flat face of the pyramids,
yeah.
One faces directly north, one faces directly south, on all three of them.
Yeah, it's because they're all lined up in the same direction.
Yeah. So their arrangement, like you said.
Yeah.
So two of the pyramids are exactly corner to corner from each other.
Yeah.
They're arranged exactly at a diagonal from each other.
Biggest one and the middle side one, right?
Yeah. And then the smallest one is raised up from the others, off a bit, off this diagonal line. Now, Orion, the constellation, it's 3 stars of its belt. And those 3 stars, 2 of them are aligned exactly, but if you drew a line between them, one of them would be raised up a little bit in the same manner of the pyramids. And I think their sizes correspond vaguely, like 2 big ones and 1 little one. It's not like, it's not to scale, but it's something like that to the pyramids. Now, that one's a little bit looser, but that is there. Quite a coincidence. If you take the Great Pyramid and measure its parameter, and then you measure its height, and you look at that ratio, so you divide one by the other.
Do you also account for the stuff put on it that's been taken off? Because they had marble and gold on them.
Yeah. So what their original size was.
Yeah. All
right. So that ratio is 2 pi, which
not bad.
Is so 2 times pi.
Yeah.
Which is so twice the circumference of a circle. No, twice the ratio of a circle's circumference to its radius or whatever. Math. Well. Yeah. Anyways, it's got pi in it. Okay.
A useful thing.
Yeah. So, the height of the pyramids and half the height of the Earth is...
What's the height of the Earth? Like from the center to top?
Yeah. Yeah, so the radius of the Earth.
Right.
Yeah. From the equator to the North Pole.
Yeah. And
the height of the pyramids. If you divide one by the other, you get roughly 432,000. So it's 1 to 432,000, or maybe it's 43,200, something like that. So in the sky, the equinoxes slowly rotate relative to the Earth, the point of the equinox. So the zodiac. So every year, the sun will rise at the point where a zodiac on the equinox will rise at a point where one of the zodiac signs is.
Yeah.
And this point changes slightly every year by 1 degree every 72 years. So every 72 years, the equinoxes are 1 degree over. So over the course of 2,600 years, the age of the Earth will change. So the age of Aquarius is currently now, I believe.
Yeah.
No, sorry. I think we're in Pisces still. Aquarius is coming very soon.
Wait, we're still coming to the age of Aquarius?
I think so, yeah.
Oh. Sorry, it's just that song, the age of
Yeah,
Aquarius.
well, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
But the dawning of the age of Aquarius is what that's about. It's about the fact that we are right between 2 points. So when the sun rises on the equinox,
I'm going to look up it for an age, of course.
and you see the so if you watch the sun rise,
Yeah.
and then you remember that point you were looking at, and then when the sun sets again, you look at that point. Well, no, that doesn't work actually. When the sun rises, the constellation it rises into will be Aquarius. It'll be right between Aquarius and Pisces,
Yes.
basically. So an entire age is 2,600 years.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 ages is 4,320 years, or something like that. So the pyramids correspond to 2 ages of the precession of the equinox in their ratio to the Earth, which could be a coincidence there. That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
They are made of massive blocks of stone, which are very hard to move, and we're still not sure how they did it.
That book we had at one point explained the whole thing.
There's a lot of theories.
They're rolling on the wood and up the ramps.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories about how they did it. But to do it cost effectively in a manner that didn't take forever, in a way that didn't risk human life, and that wasn't actually impossible and way too much work, we're still not sure. There's a lot of theories.
I mean, the Great Wall of China was built in the method that used with all the life risk and all those problems.
They're not nearly as tall. So the pyramid, I don't know. So the Great Pyramid is about 500 feet tall. And it covers an area of about 15 acres.
So it's called Great for a reason, eh?
It's kind of big.
No.
It's one of the biggest structures on Earth.
The Black Pyramid's bigger.
I don't know, what, like in 40K?
Las Vegas.
The Luxor?
Yeah.
I don't think it's bigger.
Oh, no.
No, it might be bigger than the smallest one. I think it's the same scale, potentially, but the Great Pyramid is massive.
All right.
There's very few structures on Earth that are bigger than the Great Pyramid.
Okay.
There's...
The wall.
No, I don't think so.
What? The wall's got to have more building material in it.
Great Wall of China? I'm not sure.
China's big, and that wall is actually along its border.
The pyramid's big, too. But we're not counting... Like, if we want the biggest structure, it'll be the American highway. But I'm talking building.
I consider the wall a building.
It's not a building, it's a wall. It's like a giant road. So the biggest buildings on Earth are the Mountain Pyramid, whatever it's called, in Mexico.
Yeah.
Which is the biggest building on Earth. And then the Sun
Actually, not
Pyramid.
a mountain, it's a pyramid.
And the Moon Pyramid. The Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon, both in Mexico. And then in North Korea, they're building a structure that is going to be bigger than the Mountain Pyramid. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it'll ever get finished, but they're working on it. And everything else is quite a bit smaller in general. The pyramids are very, very large.
Yeah.
So, in the pyramids, you can stand in one chamber, way up above, and you can speak. And you can hear it perfectly clearly in chambers far below. Now, I don't know if it's every chamber, but there is chambers where it lines up. The Great Pyramid contains structures inside of it. Like, they have giant beams of stone across the ceiling, like 20, 30 feet above the ground, with no clearance between them and the structure above them. But because of the order in which it would have to have been built, the beams were put in... How's this work? With that little clearance. The top of the pyramids wasn't put on after. They were working with this tiny clearance to lift these massive stones way above the heads of people, somehow. There is sarcophagi in the pyramids. Well, not really, but sarcophagi-like things.
Yeah.
No, I guess they're sarcophagi, yeah. In the pyramids. Down narrow tunnels, basically the same size as the sarcophagi, that would take 100 men to move.
Lots and lots of lube and butter.
The King's Chamber has a ratio of 4:3:5 if you do height by length by width, which is the golden ratio.
Yeah.
So it's in accordance with the golden ratio. The structure of the pyramids...
On the golden ratio thing, maybe it's on purpose, but I think people can't help but actually do the golden ratio and construction. It's so ingrained in our psyche, the golden ratio. Like, it's so much, we notice it everywhere. But I think we actually just accidentally do the golden ratio all the time.
It could be.
Like, that's my thought on golden ratio. Like, whenever I feel like, oh, this has a golden ratio, it's like, yeah, everything does. People just do the golden ratio.
You could say the same about pi, probably, to some extent.
Yeah.
So I think it's only in combination when you start thinking this might be on purpose. The Great Pyramids have... Right. They concentrate electromagnetic energy within them in a manner which the discoverers of this decided was so useful, they want to incorporate it into new solar panels to make the solar, because it will make the solar panels much more efficient in their gathering of energy.
So we make giant solar pyramids that concentrate magic?
No, it's the shape and interior design of the pyramids that causes. The scale doesn't matter. So you can make tiny little ones.
But if you're inside the pyramids, there's like this electric magnetic field?
Much higher concentration than normal background, but it's not necessarily a noticeable amount. But I was thinking that, so an ancient word for the pyramids is apparently house of energy. And that's an interesting coincidence. But also, I don't think this is my theory. I think I think there's theories that they were kind of like a holy site or a spa site, sort of, where you'd go to feel better.
You sit in the middle of the energy, go. Ugh.
Well, recently, it's been like very recently. This still hasn't been confirmed. They're finding a way to help treat Alzheimer's. It's very light electrical stimulation of the brain, and they've also found a way to help treat depression. It's very light electrical stimulation of the brain, and I wonder if
we should start crowning people into the Great Pyramid and see if it makes them feel better.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I wonder if so. Napoleon, when he visited the pyramids, I think he spent like a night alone in them. He just said like, "Hey, everyone, get out! I want to spend some time in here." And
went insane.
Well, Graham Hancock, the author, he also spent a night in the pyramids.
Yeah.
Sorry, not a night. He just spent like a couple minutes on his own in the pyramids. Yeah. He just managed to kind of get it. He wasn't supposed to do it, but he managed to do it. And he said it was a very... Now, of course, you've got a lot of these expectations in your head of what's going on here. This is interesting. But he lay down in the sarcophagus in the king's chamber, I think it was. And he said there was nothing like it. It felt like everything was just sort of resonating through him and going. So you kind of wonder, is that like the pod of reconditioning? You go in there just to, and you just feel a little bit better. Helps your memory, helps your mood, helps your digestive system.
Do some ayahuasca in that pod, who knows what happened.
Yeah.
Actually, like if there's some central thing we're doing things like, what happens because one of the things that's very apparent to us is how much we've lost in our crazy drug research.
Yes.
Like this isn't even like, ooh, crazy theory, oh, there's all these lines. Like, no. We have lost our hallucinogenic drug technology.
Yes, absolutely. So this is something I didn't know about the pyramids.
And so if you combine that with pyramids, like...
So the pyramids, their slope is 52 degrees.
Yeah.
So they're quite steep.
Yes.
The walkways inside are 26 degrees. So it's not actually easy to walk around the pyramids. They've got quite steep ways through. So people much later have put in wooden sort of ladders all the way through so you can walk like on the floor basically that you can use to help walk you around. And it makes me wonder if there are hallways like if imagine you find, like you said, our civilization ends and 12,000 years from now people walk around in, let's say, a school that's fallen over and they're walking through the vents and they're like, man, these walkways suck. What were these people doing?
Well, even what will be left behind, if you know how skyscrapers are constructed, their floors are not solid. You can, if you use enough force, you can punch a hole straight through a skyscraper floor to the next floor. But there are all these cross beams everywhere and made of metal and concrete. And so the metal concrete will last far longer than any of the other things, like the plaster, even the glass in it. So, like, you often see it, like the old skyscraper. Yeah. It's empty. Like, there are these weird structures. Like, especially if you don't have any basis of what a skyscraper is, you basically got this tower of crosshatched stone and metal. Like, what on earth was this thing used for?
So in The Prince of Thorns...
That's what I was sort of referring to.
Which I think is probably the greatest series for what a post-apocalyptic civilization would view the past as. Yeah. The castle of the main character is made of poured stone, builder's stone, which is a stone that they figured must have been poured into place. It's incredibly strong, but it's all one piece. Yeah. And the castle is this indestructible giant cube high above the ground, and they can't figure out why on earth it was built, because it's terrible for defensive design. They're like, this castle doesn't make any sense. It has no windows. But it's incredibly strong stone, so obviously they wanted it to be protected. It's got these giant, dangerous pathways curling down deep into the depths of the earth. And at the very end of all the paths, if you go deep into the dungeons, past the deepest part, there's a sign, and it says, "No way through," or "No exit," or something like that. And that's sinister. What's this here for? And what the castle is it's the bottom of a parking garage, and all the soil has eroded from around it, so now it stands above the ground. And so it's just this giant concrete cube of what remains of a parking garage. Yeah.
Well,
but they look at it, the structure of like...
Think about the Hoover Dam. So if time was to continue, and let's say the water pushes through and it ruptures, and so the dam's split in half, but they're still going to have these two enormous concrete walls. Yeah. Like, that's a bit of an overkill bridge they built there. Well, people probably think that's a dam. But still, it's like, it's the dam the Romans had, sort of thing.
Another thing in The Prince of Thorns is there's the Order of the Custodians, which are based upon, they found this great hero frozen in time, because there's little pockets of frozen time around the world. Yeah. And he's the guardian of the temple that they've made their home. And he holds a staff with a great flail head upon it. Yeah. And he wears these blue robes that are one piece with metal fasteners around his chest, and he has his badge of office upon him, which reads Custodian. And so the Order of Custodians, they all have golden versions of his staff that they carry around with them.
So the temple's a movie theater? Or a museum?
I think it was like an airport or something. Yeah. But the Custodian is a janitor with his mop. Yeah. And he was frozen in time with his mop. And so they built this entire worship around. And actually, the high priest actually found a way to unfreeze him. And
they refroze him?
No, they cut out his tongue. So they unfroze him and talked to him. And because people knew, oh, he can finally talk to us and tell us what the past was like. So the high priest unfroze him and they talked to him. And they're, oh, you're the great guardian. And then they cut out his tongue. And so nobody knows what he told the high priest. But
I've been mopping here for 30 years. Yep, nope. When you're doing custodial work, you gotta get a nice amount of water, nice amount of soap. Gotta mop up, make sure there's no stains left. So you see that carpet there. So the carpet, that's difficult to clean. We have a special tool for that. Just tell us about Marcus.
They probably told him that it wasn't a fancy sign of office.
So. I just like the idea better that it's like, tell us about the custodian and what you did. And so this guy's just obsessed with his job, so he goes into great detail.
So, on the note of Orion, the pyramids and their alignment, taken into... No, let's not do that one.
What about all the other pyramids in Egypt? Because there's like over 70.
There's a lot, yeah. No, I just want to talk about the Great Pyramids.
Well, it took them a while to figure out how to even get them right, because they built them at the wrong angles.
So, the Great Pyramids are considered to be some of the oldest pyramids.
Oh, okay.
And yet, some of the newer pyramids are in much worse condition. Yeah. And they also seem to be built quite a bit worse.
Yeah, well, in Egypt, the Great Pyramids are the biggest, right?
Yes. Yes, definitely. But the bent pyramid and the
collapsed
red
mound.
Pyramid. Yeah. Yeah, there's a collapsed mound. I forget what that one's called.
Well, so the bent pyramid is really funny looking. And so the collapsed mound is they tried doing it the other way. And so the tallest pyramid just went boosh and created this.
But those were
rubble.
We're fairly sure they were built after the Great Pyramids. Mm-hmm. So it was built by people that didn't know how to build pyramids. Whereas the pyramids, some of the oldest pyramids, were built perfectly first try. So the pyramids are potentially... Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, this is kind of obvious, but the perimeter of the pyramids are also the exact same ratio to the perimeter of the Earth as the height of the pyramids are to the height of the Earth. Yeah. But that's to be expected given that the pyramids have the ratio of pi. Yeah. A circle is going to be the same as a circle.
Yeah.
But the fact that they are at a significant ratio of 4,320 or whatever it is notable, especially given in mythology that number appears over and over and over again. So as I told you about, in Valhalla, the Einjarhen, whatever they're called, the singular warriors of Valhalla, they have 140 doors, and 580 of them will leave through each door during Valhalla. And if you multiply those together, you get 43,200 or whatever the number is. The co-conspirators. Now, this part I'm a little less certain on because 12 is a very useful number. But the co-conspirators that killed Osiris, to help Set kill Osiris, there's 72 of them, which is the amount of years it takes for a single degree of the sky to pass.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, but 72 is a multiple of 12, and 12 you can multiply by 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
So it's what the Mayans actually used as their basis of counting. Mm-hmm. Now, there is reason to believe that the Egyptians used 360 degrees for longitude, and I can't remember why. That was quite interesting. It's because the ratio of the pyramids so there's a series of towns that form like the golden ratio or something. No, it's not the golden ratio. They are significant mythological numbers in longitudinal and latitudinal lines apart.
Yeah.
Which is surprising. It'd be quite the coincidence, but it's also really interesting because 360 is arbitrary, but they might have also used that. So that's kind of cool if we inherited that.
On inheritance, I just had a thought, as me talking about, like, we see the golden ratio everywhere. And there's very much a thing that humans are obsessed with patterns. Like, we focus on them, we hyper-focus on them, and we hyper-focus on very specific structures as well, like triangles and like, absolutely obsessed with that sort of stuff. I was just thinking, you know how, like, dogs, right? Like, we had the blue healer, and she needed to hurt us.
Yeah.
And so, like, certain dogs have these behaviors ingrained in their nature. And so there's evolution of pattern recognition, which I think is where we see from, like, looking for pattern snakes, looking for that stuff. But the crazy throw out their theory is twofold. One is we have these great structures like the pyramids, and so we look for them because they're ingrained in us. And another is like, what if it's put there, sort of like the dogs? Like, it's so important. It's something we need to remember so much. It has to be a part of humanity.
Well, that would tie back into the idea that the Seven Sages created all wisdom, and it's just a rediscovery of that. Or it's almost like Jung's idea of collective unconsciousness, where if a group of humans set out to build the pyramids again, they'd do the exact same thing without even realizing it. That would be... So it is in the nature of humans to find
giant triangles in the desert
that follow the ratio of pi, that are located in the center of the earth, that are exactly aligned north-south, that align with the stars, that point to... The shafts in the Great Pyramids point to the sign... They point to a constellation 2,500 years ago, but the alignment of the pyramids would suggest, in conjunction with the Sphinx and the Nile, which moves, would suggest...
The Sphinx moves?
No, the Nile moves. Would suggest the pyramids were built more around the year 10,500 BC. But what I think is really interesting is in the secret teachings of the ancient world. Of all ages. Yeah. The secret teachings of all ages. He says that the pyramids are 70,000 years old. And now you might say, well, he's just wrong. This book's over 100 years old. What does he know? But, well...
No, getting up there.
It's 100 years old, yeah.
Yeah.
Why I say that he might know something is because he said that there was tunnels from the pyramids to the Sphinx, and there was tunnels under the Sphinx, and chambers under the Sphinx, and chambers under the pyramids. Those weren't discovered until like 10 years ago.
Mm.
But he wrote about them 100 years ago.
Yeah. Is there... Inside the Sphinx, is there chambers?
No, just under it. The Sphinx isn't a building. It's a rock they carved.
Oh, it's a carving?
Yeah.
I always thought the Sphinx was like a construct, sort of like the pyramids, like put together.
So there was a mesa, basically.
Yeah.
And they carved it away down into a Sphinx. So the Sphinx is actually in a depression. And the Sphinx, regularly over history, has been completely covered by sand because sand blows into the hole it's in. Now, if you look at the Sphinx on the one side, it does have bricks along it. So it looks like it's been built. But those are repairs.
Yeah, they should really fix our face.
Because the Sphinx is really, really, really old.
Yeah.
It's older than the pyramids. Probably. And it's unknown how old it is. Now, it points at directly east. The Sphinx points exactly east. And when Leo was the constellation that the sun rose in at the equinox, was a very long time ago, like 12,000 years ago or 14,000 years ago or something, which would be a pretty good hint at when the Sphinx was built, potentially.
Yeah. And
there is people theorize that the Sphinx used to be a lion and the head was rebuilt.
By the Egyptians for...
The emperor might have fixed the Sphinx, and he's like, the head's beyond repair, let's just do something.
Carve it down from a lion's mane to a person's face.
Yeah, and make like the mane into a Nemes and the muzzle into my face, that sort of thing. Yeah. And
how hard would the Sphinx be to repair now?
They might still be doing repairs, I don't know. Yeah. There's signs of like water erosion on the Sphinx as well, which
well, didn't the Nile cross over?
I don't think so.
Because the old kingdom, the actual city that was near the pyramids, is covered in mud. Because the Nile moves, right?
Yeah.
And it moved across the old city and covered the whole thing with mud.
Well, it used to go along roughly around the base of the pyramids. Yeah. But, I don't know if the Sphinx was ever covered, but there was a time potentially when Egypt... Well, there was a time when Egypt wasn't a desert. And the question is, was Egypt the city? Like, was Cairo already a city then? And if it was, and the Sphinx was built then, that would make the Sphinx very, very old.
Yeah.
And it would make a lot of sense to explain the erosion that seems to be caused by rain on the Sphinx. Because it's vertical rather than horizontal, like wind or something might be. And, but these are theoretical. These aren't confirmed things. But what makes me think there might be some value to it is that all the legends say this stuff is really old. And I think you have to give these things a decent shake, because there's no reason people just got this stuff completely wrong. So there's an Arabic saying, I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it's something along the lines of, men fear time, but time fears the pyramids. Or it's something like, time watches men go by, the pyramids watch time go by. Something like that.
I was thinking, one of the things that would probably be left over for us
is the pyramid.
Yes.
Yeah.
And imagine how much, so humanity collapses 10,000 years later. How much of a loop the pyramids would throw those people for then? It's already thrown us for a loop.
Yeah. Well, another thing that might still exist is Mount Rushmore, which I talked about before. But yeah, the pyramids. So I was thinking...
Well, they're in the center of the earth, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's very, very stable where they are.
Yeah. Yeah, potentially. Well, they're in the center of the landmass. That doesn't mean the center of weight.
I know, but still, it's very stable where they are.
It's in a desert, which helps, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also very well constructed. They're very durable.
Yeah.
It's very hard to destroy them.
A local Egyptian man for the past 20 years has been trying to destroy the pyramids with his own claw hammer. He has done a small amount of damage.
He's almost gotten through one of the bricks. There's some really weird stuff in the carvings in the Egyptians. So that they have these giant stones they carve for obelisks, right?
Yeah.
And you'll see cut marks where they're cutting. And the cut mark goes off at a wrong angle. Yeah. So it's they messed up and they abandoned the obelisk. And you're okay, whatever. But the cut mark, it extends for 6 feet in a perfectly straight line in the wrong direction. And you're like, what? How? So the options are, right?
Zoom.
Well, the obvious one is like when you're working with like a circular saw, right? And you miss and it goes like, and then, oh, darn, I messed up. Now I need a new thing. Or there was some dude for like 20 days just carving in a perfectly straight line in the wrong direction. Like a moron.
Yeah. Or you misfire the laser.
Yeah. Or whatever. But it does appear that it was a quick mistake. Like, oh, dang, whoops.
Yeah.
And that is really interesting on its own. But think, like, we can't build the pyramids today. And you can say, well, sure, we have the technology to do it, but then why haven't we?
What would be the point?
Because it's cool. Like, why did they build them?
Yeah.
And you say, well, okay, we could do it. It's way too expensive, so it's not practical. So, yeah. But the Egyptians could afford it, obviously, because they built them.
So, some calculations were done. I don't know how accurate it is, but it's this joke, which is if America spent 2% less on its military budget, then we could build a giant black sphere in the harbor of New York and even have it ominously hum. And like, this giant black sphere, like it is ridiculously huge, and so the calculations is we could build it. I don't know how true that is, but there's also the whole calculation of if Britain stopped paying for the NHS, they could easily run a base on the moon, like, and have money left over, a lot of money.
So my I think I'm forgetting a bunch of stuff about the pyramids I want to talk about, actually, which is a shame, but it'll come to me over time in other episodes and whatnot. But if you build a structure in the center of the earth with the ratio pi,
no, that's why we can't build the pyramids. The spot's occupied.
So this is one. The Kingdom of Egypt is 7 degrees wide. That's what the ratio was. The Kingdom of Egypt is 7 degrees wide in exactly in longitude.
Yeah,
that's kind of that's a pretty massive coincidence, especially because this is the borders of Egypt as declared by the Egyptians, not the borders they used.
Yeah.
This is the
old kingdom. This is Egypt. Their empire expanded beyond the borders of Egypt.
Well, they were smaller than their borders in a lot of ways. These are the borders, like degrees longitude. Egypt is a north-south kingdom.
Yeah.
But the longitudinal borders, they only needed like 3 degrees. But they said we extend these full 7. Yeah. Because that was the holy all the holy land of Egypt.
Yeah.
But the fact that it perfectly lines up with 7 degrees longitude means that they probably did use 360 degrees or 720 degrees, like some ratio in that nature. They wouldn't have used 180 because then, like, what's 3.5 degrees? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But that would also mean they knew the size of the Earth. And also, the location of the pyramids, if you draw a line from the pyramids to the corner of the kingdom and a line from the pyramids to the other corner of the kingdom, it's like to the two north corners of the kingdom,
you get a giant triangle.
You get a giant triangle, which perfectly encapsulates the Nile Delta, which is also interesting. But I don't think you can do that. What I mean by that is either the pyramids were built in the center of the earth or they're built to perfectly encapsulate the Nile Delta, unless the Egyptians built the Nile, because only one of those work, right? Unless you...
Well, given what the Japanese do to their rivers...
The only thing I could say is that...
Have you seen the Japanese flood holes?
No, but I've seen the river in Hiroshima.
Okay, so you know Duran's halls, like in the movie where they're running through those stone pillars?
Yeah.
The Japanese flood halls look like that. Like they open up gates to let the river go underground, and it's literally structures like that.
Well, the Nile's very big.
Yes.
It's very, very big. I think if they moved the Nile to align with the pyramids, that would probably be the biggest effort ever taken by humanity. Like bigger than Panama Canal
maybe there's a reason why Egypt's holy then.
Bigger than the Panama Canal or the Yukon Trench or the Thunderstone or any of those things. And
you know, the Americans wanted to do a project to secure fresh water, which was redirect the Yukon River down into the States.
Ah.
And that would be one of the biggest projects ever done.
That would be ridiculous, yeah.
Yeah.
Why not the Mackenzie or something? Wouldn't they have to change the direction of the river?
Yep. It was worthwhile. even with all calculations, we went over this in our class. With all calculations to secure fresh water, it was worthwhile. Besides the amount of devastation it would have and how much Canada said no.
Well, why would Canada agree?
Yeah, I say it's worthwhile besides how much Canada said no and the devastation.
And isn't it just pure mountains between...
Yes.
It sounds like a nightmare. Yeah.
But as a project that it was proposed and like argued about for a bit.
Wow. So, if you build a structure...
Joke's on them, they'd be full of sewage right now if they'd done it.
Is Yukon River full of sewage?
Yeah, our sewage facility finds broke and sewage has flushed out into the river.
Ew. So if the Yukon River... No. If the pyramids were built at the center of the earth, ratio of pi, perfectly north-south aligned, they contain within them the golden ratio. They contain acoustic and electromagnetic resonance.
Yeah.
And they contain building skills of the likes that we're not sure we can replicate to this day. And they were created on such a scale and with such stability that we have no other equivalents on Earth.
Aliens.
No. My question is that not better than the golden record?
Yeah.
Are you not saying, hey, pay attention. We know what we're doing, clearly.
Yeah.
This is not coincidence. One or two things might be coincidence, but you are still discovering things using the electromagnetic spectrum of all things that demonstrate that this was not a coincidence.
We should try firing sound cannons at the pyramids and see what happens.
So there's actually things near the pyramids. There are these sort of cup-shaped hemispheres.
Yeah.
That if you fire sound into them, they will resonate, and if you spin them while you're firing sound into them, they resonate in such a way that you can levitate objects in them. Like similar, you know how you can levitate stuff with sound? You can do that with these things. They're the right shape for it when they're spinning. And they're scattered around the pyramids.
Can they be directed at the pyramids? Then fire the sound off at the pyramids and then like summon the great old one.
There's also boats buried all around the pyramids. Which is interesting because the first seafaring people were after good seafaring people were after the Egyptians, apparently. But the Egyptians have these boats that look much more like modern boats, like the Phoenicians or better than the Greek boats, like the Greek Drachma or whatever Trireme. They sucked.
Triremes are rubbish.
They sucked. And
you know what the trireme is? It's not a boat. It's a battering ram. They're actually battering rams. They're not meant to be boats.
Well, they're logs because you can't steer them. You just kind of.
The triremes were invented to fight the Persians.
But it's kind of weird, isn't it? Like, the Phoenicians were able to sail wherever they wanted, and the Vikings and whatnot.
Yeah, but... No, the Greeks didn't make their boats to sail around. It was, there's these guys with these giant rafts. Well, we're going to make a battering ram in the water and take them out before they can land on the shore. The triremes are literally battering rams in the water. Like, they're designed the way the front of their head is, and all the poles, you get a massive burst of force, and you cut someone else's boat in half. That is their design. And they're tall. So you jump off the trireme onto the person's boat and attack them, or you throw stuff down. Like, they're not boats. They're siege engines that happen to float.
Right. Yeah, so that's why they suck, I guess.
Yes.
They weren't built for boating. But it does make me wonder. Let's say we got 20 years notice that civilization was going to end, which it might. I mean, because in 10 years' time, there's a whole bunch of stuff lining up, which is hopefully not going to come to pass. But we should be going through one of the bigger points of the torrid asteroid stream, which is something we go through every year where we see the torrid meteor showers near the end of October. Yeah. But
they have actually an observatory by the hot springs now set up specifically to look at them.
Yeah. There is a giant mass inside of them. It's like 10 kilometers wide or something. And we're moving closer and closer to it, essentially. And we come quite close to it every, 26,000 years or something. Mm. And it seems to line up with...
October.
With comet strikes.
Yeah.
Asteroid strikes, that sort of thing. So but also, the other thing that comes in 2030 is we're kind of due for the magnetic poles flipping. and one of the estimated times is around then. And
what does the flip even do, though? Like, how
we
does it
don't
work?
know, and we don't know. So here, I was thinking, how do you flip the magnetic polarity, right? And one way you can do it...
Whoop!
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking. You reverse the spin, right? So you flip the Earth upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that reverses the direction of spin. So I was kind of... If that is
And then the Australians will be on top.
Why I think that's not the case is because I don't think any species would have fossil records like Stegosaurus. They find them like 1 million years apart or something, right?
Yeah.
I don't think any species would last more than 26,000 years. Like I can't imagine surviving the Earth flipping upside. Maybe you can. Maybe we'll find out soon.
Maybe it does like some weird like spinning around.
Also in 2030, we should see the sun at height solar activity.
So you're saying that the 2012 was off by a couple of years?
Well, so the 2012 lines up, plus or minus about 40 years, with the time when the Earth, the Sun, and the center of the galaxy are all in alignment. And
that creates a gravitational slingshot, right?
We don't know. But there is a theory that at certain times we align with some sort of... Because the Earth and the Sun also dip in and out of alignment with the galaxy.
Yeah.
And at the time of height of alignment, we get the most gravitational pull, and that's when we'd get the most interlopers into the solar system.
Yeah.
And there is a person that has correlated that every 32 million years with mass extinction events. Now, we aren't due for a mass extinction event in that time frame, but we could see the after effects of something like that. So, for example, if a mass extinction event caused a massive comet to hit Earth, the fragments of that comet might be coming by again every 12,000 years or something.
Thankfully, we have the moon.
Yeah, we have the moon, which helps a bit. And
the moon helps a lot.
So imagine, right, this isn't really related to the pyramids entirely, but it is in some sense. It's just crazy, though. Imagine hyper-advanced civilization.
Yeah.
And Atlas is on his throne. And they realize that civilization just keeps falling to these mass extinction events every 26,000 years.
Yeah.
And Phaeton has the solution. And he says, I am going to steal the sun. And I am going to ride it and cause the great solution that will solve everything. And, or something along those lines. Or maybe Thoth says, I will protect the earth forevermore. But there is going to be a cost here. And he creates the moon, as Thoth did.
Yeah.
The sign of health. Thoth's symbol is the sign of regeneration upon the moon. But the devastation of introducing a new planetary body, because the moon has the same composition of Earth, and so we say it was caused by an impact with the Earth.
Yeah.
But Thoth creates the moon from the Earth. And it causes massive devastation. They say we need to leave a record of ourselves. So they build the pyramids. Civilization is wiped out. But that instability that for 200,000 years has been going on will end finally. There will be a horrible time of devastation for about 2,000 years. The Younger Dryas times. But then after that, we will be in a warm, stable period. And these people will be able to flourish far greater than we ever did. Thanks to that we had to take this step back. But I don't think Thoth would do that. But Phaeton might. He might think, I know better than God. I will face God. Really interesting story in Paradise Lost where the reason Satan challenges God is because he thinks God is weak, because God never demonstrates his power.
Yeah.
And then Phaeton gets his butt handed to him instantly because God is just meek. God is all powerful. He just doesn't use it.
Yeah.
And so Satan's like, I know better than God, so I will defeat God. And then God just slaps him down. And so Phaeton says, I can ride the sun. And he can't control the sun. And he burns the Africans, and he causes fires all around the world. And so Zeus is forced to strike him down. Zeus Horus is forced to strike him, or Odin, forced to strike him down. He crashes, and the devastation that continues. And so this will never happen again. Thoth creates the moon to protect the earth. I don't know. It's just kind of
the moon really. Like you said, it helps a bit. It helps a lot.
But if the moon's hollow, right? Because there's this hollow moon conspiracy, right? But what if the moon's a construct?
So, Moonbreaker?
Is that James Bond?
No.
Steel Sky is the Nazi one, right?
Yeah, no. It's this know that guy who made 2012 and all those movies?
Yeah.
So he made a movie where the moon is this giant spaceship that is full of AI. And
So
it gets closer to the Earth and like messes with everything, basically kills off all humanity. But then they realign it and bring it back in position. It was this giant device that held all of human knowledge in it.
I was reading a bit about the 2012 guy. Do you know he's like really well read? Like he bases his stuff on disaster theories from legends and myths and whatnot. Like the whole 2012 movie, he based that on the Earth crust shift theory of Charles Hapgood.
Ah.
Like he actually, I mean, he actually. Like, I'm not saying he's necessarily intelligent. I'm not saying he's not intelligent, but he's well read. He takes these ideas and he uses them.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. I didn't realize that.
The moon is a construct.
So the period, there's an 80-year period that we can't quite predict because the sun and the sun and the Earth are way too big.
Yeah.
But somewhere within 80 years of the year 2000, 40 years on either side, we will line up perfectly with the center of the galaxy, the sun, and Earth. Yeah. And let's say the Mayans, you can't line up perfectly, but they got their rough estimate, and they send it forward. Now, I don't see why they'd choose a day. That doesn't really make sense to me. But there is a whole lot lined up on 2030. And I hope it's nothing. I really do. But there is the other aspect, which is, let's say there was an ancient civilization that built the pyramids or something like that. Thoth and the Seven Sages. And they were experts that could they could levitate stone with their voices. They had technologies that we don't understand. We don't comprehend, right? They were experts with drugs in ways that we have no idea. Yeah. They're experts in the human mind and in spirituality. They probably weren't experts in computers and space exploration and missiles. Yeah. We might have taken a completely different path this time because we do believe we are capable of stopping asteroids at this point, as long as we can see them.
We actually have things in the atmosphere designed to stop them.
The problem is seeing them.
Yes.
Because, I think it's been said something like we can detect 90% of Earth threat asteroids 30 years before they hit, but those 10% are invisible. Yes. So our odds are in our favor, but there is that window. But if, let's say... Oh, there's also another thing, which is if Planet X exists...
Oh, bastard.
It could be that its orbit, which I think they calculated would take like 2,600 years or something massive, when it got close enough to the rest... Because they think what happens is...
It goes in and out of the Oort cloud, right?
Well, what they think is everyone's orbiting the sun. Like, here's the sun, and everything's orbiting it like this. Yeah. And then Planet X is orbiting on the other side of the orbital path. Yeah. Like, it's not in alignment with any of the other planets. And so it barely ever interacts with anything. But when it does, its gravity might be enough to send, like, the Oort cloud flinging towards us, which would be annoying.
But we have Mars.
We've got a bunch of little things in the way.
Well, was that one thing, the one planet saved Earth from...
Well, Jupiter was hit by the comet Shoemaker-Levy, I think, which I don't think it would have hit Earth. No, it was if Saturn and Jupiter align, they send things directly at Earth, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
That happens around Halloween.
Maybe, I can't remember.
No, it does. That's what we talked about. It happens around Halloween. They basically make a slingshot that shoots stuff at Earth around Halloween.
Yeah, so there's... This isn't to say... Look, there's that tribe that was experts at growing rice. Because they worshipped the moon, and basically it was the best clock in the world. Yeah. The best rice clock on Earth, and it was due to their worship of the moon. We have no clue everything that's in space, but it is very possible that humans developed ritual to calculate dark matter without ever understanding dark matter. And we cannot think of Earth as not being part of the universe. The entire universe is happening all at once. And if a star on the other side of the galaxy launches a series of planets at our solar system, they will come to our solar system. Yeah. It's not like we're in some simulation separated from the rest of reality. We are part of that reality. We don't just peer into space. We peer up at what is there.
So, a rogue galaxy... Sorry, not galaxy. A rogue solar system could theoretically be going the wrong way in the galaxy.
Yeah.
And it could collide with ours.
Or a galaxy could intercept with ours,
Yes.
and that would cause all sorts of craziness. But if, let's say...
But even it could cause... But there's so much space in between. It might be a perfect pass.
But let's say the Olmecs were, or the Egyptians, or the Atlanteans, were experts in astrology like we are in computers.
I think we're kind of rubbish at computers, personally.
But we have them.
Yeah.
Now, of course, here's the other thing about the pyramids. You've got all these completely unhuman hospital shapes, right?
Yeah.
If they were full of, like, you know, copper wires, wooden panels, whatever it might, those could all be rusted, and we're like, why are the pyramids empty?
Yeah.
Like, why do we have these completely empty? So that there was this one thing that happened, though. They're going through the pyramids, and there's this giant stone plug in the way where there was definitely a hallway. So they mined through this thing, and another one fell down in place. And so they gave up. They tunneled all the way around. And they eventually figured that there's this shaft full of like 8 stone plugs that will just slide down one after the other. And it's like, what is this, a rail cannon or like a trap? Like a really weird trap?
Well, I had this thought. So, you know you're saying this 2030 event, right?
Yeah.
And so we detect it, and there's this cluster of rocks in that all our technology can't stop.
Yeah.
And then slowly the pyramids light up and start glowing. And they're aiming at the thing. But then some idiot drilled a hole into the pyramids, and they just go bzzzt, and then don't work. Earth explodes.
It just like pyramid like topples and starts firing giant slugs at like Mars. Just blows up Mars.
Oops.
Dang it, that would have been useful.
I should have dug that hole into the pyramids.
Now, I don't want the whole 2030 idea to take away from the fact that the pyramids are a marvel of engineering.
Yeah.
I don't want... It's tricky because it's... I don't know. Deviation from the accepted narrative sounds crazy. Even if it has reason to exist.
I don't even know what the accepted narrative of pyramids is, because...
Well, they're 5,000 years old. They were built by slaves or something that used potentially buoyancy to construct them. They weren't built by a hyper-advanced civilization from before.
But, I mean, even... We know. They're no longer for people's graves.
Yeah.
Like that, like the older pyramids later on, some of those are. And then they moved to the Valley Kings. But the Great Pyramids are not a graveyard.
Well, that's still debated, but it doesn't seem like they are.
Well, there's no corpses inside them.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a mark against it. But people still claim they are.
But do you know what the Egyptians were obsessed with? Preserving corpses. All the other pyramids we've gone into, all the other structures we've gone to, we have found the corpses, and then we ate them because we're freaks.
But you know what the Europeans are obsessed with? Eating corpses.
So the Europeans could have gotten into the pyramids sooner and eaten them?
Yeah. Napoleon spent a whole night alone in there. Like, Khufu might have not been a big guy, but it's still going to be an all-nighter.
Napoleon wasn't that big either. I mean, he wasn't short, but he wasn't tall.
He just, like, pushes this lid open. He's like, mine, all mine. Get out, go.
And that's why he went insane at that battle. Ate a mummy.
He had a cold, I think. I don't think he went insane.
He was quite ill.
Yeah.
Worse than that cold.
Yeah, but it's not like, I don't think he was like mad like Hitler or anything.
No, but
I just think he was under the weather.
He had gout, I think.
Yeah, he had gout.
Yeah.
He had gout for a lot of his life,
yeah.
but he had a cold or something when he was, and he didn't have the handkerchief he always had, which
he lost his lucky handkerchief.
Yeah,
well, which good thing he lost that.
Yeah, I mean,
and also he'd be speaking French right now.
Ugh. Goodness, that lucky handkerchief.
Well, actually, we wouldn't be speaking French though, because people Canada was already starting to be like colonized and settled around the same time as the Napoleonic War.
Yeah, but maybe.
Well, we would have been the French with like Quebec.
The French uprising would have happened. They would have a second one, and it would have succeeded because they didn't have the backing of English.
We would have had like Alberta is the unique one, and then everywhere else is like Quebec, and then it's the Alberta exemption.
And Napoleon wouldn't have sold Louisiana because he was having such an easy time with the war.
Yeah.
The Americans would have never gotten Louisiana, and then the French would have a foothold, and they would like the Americans would become French.
Yeah.
And
that's why I'm saying Alberta would be the new Quebec versus all English people.
Napoleon would conquer Haiti and become the richest country on earth, and then he would defeat the Spanish, and the Prussians wouldn't revolt because
Really shouldn't eat in that corpse.
they didn't feel like it, and the Russians would give up because they thought that would be nice to do. It's kind of funny, actually, with a lot of these things, where there's so many ways that the person that lost could have lost.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, what if the Americans had never entered World War II? Well, then the Russians would have still crushed the Germans.
Yeah.
What if he had never betrayed the Russians? And the Americans would have beat both of them. Or it's like, what if Napoleon had won at Waterloo? Well, then the Prussians probably would have revolted.
Yeah.
There's always... I mean, maybe if he takes the momentum from Waterloo, the Prussians are scared.
I think a bigger question is, what if the French and England around that time period had been fighting each other? Because then the English could have actually looked at America and sent their proper armies. But they might not have needed to send their proper armies because they wouldn't have been raising the taxes from the war.
And then they'd still have a colony.
Yeah.
Or what if...
And then our neighbors to the south would be all, pip, pip, what, Charlie ho.
What if the Germans never betrayed the Russians during World War II, and the Japanese had fully succeeded at Pearl Harbor, and that it allowed them to, because the Americans would then be set back about like 2 years.
Well, there's this book called Man in the High Tower.
Right, but doing it realistically, right? So the Americans are set back 2 years, and in that time, the Japanese conquer Papua New Guinea, and now they have a rubber and oil supply. And so the Australians can't push them back. And although the Australians were winning to some degree, but the Japanese, because they don't have the American reinforcements, are able to finally kick out the Australians. And they now get their established base. And the Americans are still outproducing the Japanese, but now the Japanese have a 2-year head start. And the Russians and the Germans, there's not really anyone that can beat them, because the French, for some reason, I don't know why the French lost so quickly, but they do. Like Queslin, I guess, just
surrendered.
Yeah, but I mean, even then, I don't know.
There's a lot of guerrilla warfare in France. A lot.
It just seems like, France should have held up better, but it didn't. So
also, a lot of the French military was focused in a mountain that Hitler went around.
The Spanish decide not to be neutral. They decide to join with the rest of the fascists.
Yeah.
Mussolini, someone slaps him, and he stops being obsessed with Ethiopia, and he stops losing to people with spears against his tanks. And Switzerland decides to not help out the...
Both sides.
No, they only help out the Axis.
Yeah.
They decide to throw it in with the fascists.
I think America would still win.
I don't know, because if Japan got like 4 of their main strategies lucky enough, right? Okay, like they pull off cherry blossoms at night. They get the bubonic plague in the United States. Pearl Harbor goes flawlessly. The massive sea battle, that final sea battle they have, Japan
somehow wins with wooden boats.
Surprises the Americans.
They have a lot of zeros. It's just each a 0 per boat taken out.
They do kamikaze right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And
they redesigned the zeros to be specifically for that. They just get rid of the guns.
Then the Mexicans invade the United States along with the
that was
Canadians.
one of the plans. I was trying to get the Mexicans to attack the U.S.
Oh.
That was a deal. There was a deal to have the Mexicans attack the United States.
The Nazis successfully convinced the Native Americans to revolt, which is what they wanted to do.
And they wanted Mexico to attack the U.S.
Yeah. I think Mexico didn't in the slightest want to, though.
Yeah, but that's what the Nazis tried to do that with Mexico.
No, wasn't it the Soviets or something?
Maybe.
I don't remember.
No, it was the Soviets.
Anyways, the Mexicans and the Canadians band together to attack the United States.
So you're saying that Canada's no longer helping Britain in this scenario?
The Mexicans make a very compelling argument that they'll take California. So that convinces the Canadians to chip in.
We get Alaska.
And I don't know.
And Greenland turns into a giant mecca.
Who else? Like
the African war fails.
Yeah. The Ottomans are gone. Yeah, I think that'd do it. Seems unlikely. Does Hearts of Iron do it decently, or do they give the Germans a slight advantage or
No,
something?
they do it well.
Like you just never lose as the, never win as the Axis.
So they set it. Know how they set it to the state that the world was in at the time?
Yeah.
So they set it to the state. They seed it, so these things are likely to happen.
Yeah.
And then they let it run, and with the random rolls of the dice, things can change.
I just wonder if, like, if the game Axis and Allies, or if Hearts of Iron was realistic, if the Axis would ever have a chance.
So how you win as the Axis, I do know this in Hearts of Iron, is you take France or like one of those places, and then you stop.
Yeah.
And
I guess you win by convincing the Americans it's not worth their time.
well, so that's one of the things, but also you don't overreach because you gobble up some countries, and then you make peace.
What if
That's how you do it, because the thing that happened with the Axis is they kept trying to expand, and people said, "No, you can't keep expanding."
Okay, I can actually think of a win scenario. If the Soviets and the Germans never break their alliance, and the Germans develop nukes first and rockets, I think they win, just by scaring every other country into peace.
It is basically impossible to take Britain and that time frame without that.
But I think they don't need to conquer Britain. They didn't want to conquer Britain. Hitler wanted to be like Britain.
Yes.
He was like, we could be the two great powers that have our colonies and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I think all that they have to do is take all the German peoples and France, which is kind of German, and then stop and say, we've got nukes. We want a white peace.
Yes.
And everyone's like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Because the Americans might be able to win, but the cost would be too high.
Yeah. Well, even if Japan doesn't attack America, America might just not get involved.
A lot of them wanted to. The Japan was the excuse. But yeah, they might not be enough political power to do so. But because Germany by far had the best scientists.
Yes.
So that they could
Well, even
like Einstein, Oppenheimer, they got them all.
if Germany, I don't know if they needed their insanity to go to the war, but I'm talking about the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they needed the Holocaust to rile the people into a war frenzy.
I don't think they did. I think they could have done what the Americans did with the Japanese internment camps.
I think that without the Holocaust, that would have actually made not as many people want to even fight them.
And I think
because that rallied like they were being evil, actually evil. It wasn't just a conquering nation; it was an evil conquering nation. And when you fight evil, everyone's going to fight it.
And I don't think people didn't know about the Holocaust entirely. Like they kind of knew, but they didn't fully understand it. But I think it wasn't cost effective. They put more energy into it than benefited them. They should, if they just rounded them up in camps and forced them to make ammunition, they would have gained.
Yeah.
But instead, they actually wasted resources and soldiers on killing people that could otherwise be on the front line. Or what you could even do is give every Jew a rifle and stick them on the Western Front. Like I think it was Dan Carlin made the argument that Hitler obviously actually hated the Jews because he was mean to them to the degree that it was counterproductive.
Yeah.
It would have made more sense to enslave them than you would have gained for your country.
In the laundry files, it's basically they actually go into this a bit. So the Holocaust was a giant human sacrifice to summon demons to attack the rest of the world. Is his thing in that, because pain is a good resonator for demons. And so then the British Secret Service basically had counter wizards whose job was to stop that. And so that's where the laundry came from, is them trying to stop the German necromancers.
You know, it's not incredibly far from the truth in some ways. The British had they had at least the banner of the Castle Bran at the ready, I think it was, which was supposed to be unfurled in a time of great need to save Britain. It could only be unfurled 3 times and already be unfurled twice, but they were ready to unfurl that.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe they should unfurl it now.
And
I think they'll muddle through.
one of the times they unfurled it was because the castle was on fire. And I don't know, it seems like a waste. Like, I mean, like all of Britain, can't you put out the fire on your own? Yeah. And then the Nazis, like the swastika is a really interesting sign because it's found all around the world. First Nations use it, Asians use it, Africans use it. It's everywhere.
High school students use it.
Yeah. Skinheads use it.
What I was referring to with high school, it's just easy to carve or draw. Like, you have some grid paper, and you just start making a fractal, and then you go, oops.
But it's also like a sign of unity. It's like the 4 elements coming into one or something.
Yeah.
It's like a whirlpool or something. So it's a very powerful symbol, and it's mystical. And the Nazis were very much into mysticism. They wanted to find those sacred artifacts and use them. But
Shroud of Turin, all that.
I don't know if they... Like, demon summoning's evil, and I don't think they were trying to be evil. Yeah. But I don't think Nazis wanted to be evil. I think they were evil. But I don't think that was the intent. I think the intent was to be German and to get rid of the non-Germans. And it was not an enjoyable duty.
It was a necessary evil.
It was a necessary evil. Like Himmler, when he went to Auschwitz, I think it was, he was horrified by it.
Yeah.
He couldn't stand to look at it, and the head of Auschwitz, I think it was, remembers Himmler coming up to him and putting a hand on his shoulder and being like, "Keep up the good work." It's just like he's like, "I can't stand to see this, but you're doing God's work here. You're doing what I can't do. You're a hero because you're doing what very few people can stomach, essentially."
Yeah.
So I don't think they liked what they were doing to the Jews. I think they thought it was necessary, which is interesting compared to like neo-Nazis, where they have a very different view of the Jews in some ways, where they see them as absolute evil, or maybe that's not true. I'm not a neo-Nazi, so I wouldn't know exactly, but it does seem to be.
I mean, some of my best friends are.
It does seem to be a different take almost, where the Germans saw it as a necessity. The modern ones see it as more of a pleasure almost, but maybe that's not true. Yeah. But I guess if you can take pleasure in the necessary duty, it allows you to sleep at night, because then I'm crushing these horrible things that work against me. Like, if you have a cricket in your house, it's really annoying. You get it out, you chase it around, you catch it, you let it outside. You're like, okay, there we go. Cricket's okay, I'm okay. And then there's another cricket, you catch it. Like, that's annoying. Your house is infected with like thousands of crickets. Yeah. You just start squishing them and you can't sleep, and you're annoyed and you're hateful. And that hatred, like, if there's one cricket, you care about the cricket, but you just don't want it there. Yeah. If there's that many, it becomes a hatred and a necessity and an evil but necessary duty to kill them as many as possible.
Well, even 2 winters ago, we had a weird case where... So we had mice come in.
Yeah, I think mice would have been better.
Yeah. Well, we had mice come in.
Yeah.
And so we set up a bunch of mouse traps, me and my roommate. And so we're dealing with the mice over time. And then one of the traps went off and basically brained one of the mice. Yeah. It didn't kill it. It just stunned it. And so because it stunned the mouse and is like completely out of it, I got a bag, put the mouse in the bag, and I went for a walk to an abandoned house that's nearby where I live. And I let the mouse out right next to the abandoned house. Now, there's a thing of, well, I separated the mouse from its whole family. It's going to be a territory it doesn't know. Like, there's a lot of factors that's like, this is kind of horrible for the mouse. Or, oh, the mouse will just make its way back. But it's like, you're lucky you suffered a concussion instead of getting smashed. So I'm going to give you a chance. It's not going to be a good one, but still.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think...
But getting the mice is sort of satisfying. It's like, got another one, they're no longer in the house.
Yeah, you become split in your mind.
Yeah. Well, even it's like, these are mice. They have a mass benefit from living where I am. They get warmth, they get food. but they're also living in the house of the most dangerous predator in the world. And this predator does not tolerate unwelcome guests. And so it's that sort of weird mixed, like, logic to make myself sleep at night that I'm trapping the mice.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, with our mouse traps, we try to make them as quick as possible.
Yeah, we're not here to torture them. Yeah, they weren't torturing the Jews to death. They were using gas chambers. They're trying to quick, painless, sufficient.
Yeah.
Now there was guards that were torturing Jews.
Yes, but those were individual messed up people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually where the Soviet labor camps were different. Because the gulags
Were to torture them, I guess.
Yes, they were. The gulags were absolutely giant torture devices.
But you know that, he's that famous, he's a general or a soldier. He says, if I was put in a room, had a gun with 2 bullets, and there was a traitor and an enemy, I'd shoot the traitor twice.
Yeah.
And the people in the gulags
Were traitors.
were traitors.
Yes.
They were people that were defying perfection. You were up against the state.
Mm-hmm.
And so they deserved everything that was coming to them because they were the worst possible. They were a traitor. Traitors is about as bad as you can be.
Carrying bags of salt.
There's a reason treason is the highest crime in many countries.
Yeah.
If not all countries. And
accusations of treason should not be made lightly.
I don't know. Like, obviously, pedophilia is considered quite highly bad.
Yeah.
And murder.
In Canada and the UK, treason gets you a higher sentence.
Well, treason is the highest possible sentence in Canada.
Well, treason exceeds the Canadian norm. Because our life sentence is
30, I think.
30 years.
20 or 30,
Yeah, whereas treason gets you 90.
Oh, I thought the treason was 30 as well. Maybe.
No, treason gets you 90.
Wow. You know, any act against the Queen is treason.
Yeah.
It's like, don't tick her off for going on for a long time. But,
no, our treason laws are actually a lot worse than the UK's.
I wonder about pedophilia, though, where that is.
Well, it is... Pedophilia is being a traitor.
I guess pedophilia is not forgivable, but it isn't dangerous.
Yeah, but you're being a traitor. You're breaking trust.
Mm.
You're breaking a trust that is given absolutely.
Yeah, because you're dealing with children who are...
Yeah. Not only are you breaking children's trust, you're breaking the trust of society that you won't do that.
Well, there's an implicit trust in adults that they'll look after children.
Yeah.
So, I think child murder you could put on the same level as pedophilia. Like if you're murdering children for the sake of murdering children.
Yeah.
Like if it's a murder of convenience, then that's a different story. But if you're murdering children for the sake of murdering children, I think that's equivalent.
Yeah.
If not worse. I think because rape is bad.
Yeah.
But I don't think rape is the main component of pedophilia that makes it so awful. I think it's the destruction of trust in the shared bond between adult and child.
Well, there is...
And the abuse of your power over them.
There is the cascade of corruption as well to be considered from that angle. I mean, if you're trying to do this, then you're even more messed up. But being a pedophile to cause more pedophilia in the future, like trying to spread it.
I don't think anyone does that, do they? I hope not. There's probably some.
Well, that just seems absolute wretched. Like, that is no longer a human.
That's trying to cause the destruction of society.
Yes.
That is treason.
Yes. Well, isn't that that book you're talking about?
Which
Brave
one?
New World?
I haven't read Brave New World.
Oh, okay. I thought you talked about it.
I've talked about it before, but I don't...
Like today, I thought you mentioned Brave New World.
No.
Okay.
Destruction of society.
Well, it's not destruction. The Brave New World Society. Do you know the synopsis of it?
Roughly, yeah.
It's
paradise. It's a utopia where people are given drugs to keep them happy with the state. And
and like everyone's...
It's just hedonism.
Yeah, hedonism, and then they encounter they start colonizing a place with normal people.
Yeah, doesn't someone come from the past or something? Like a time traveler? Or...
I don't know if I think they're just colonizing a place that's just normal. Is the whole thing.
I thought it was like a guy comes from the past into the future. but
maybe
I've read like excerpts, but I haven't read it.
Yeah.
But I know the undermining and stability. This is something that's actually really. So when I was 19, 20, girlfriend at the time said how awful advertising was towards women. And I was like, what? I'd never seen that. What are you talking about? She showed me these ads I'd never seen before with women that were scantily dressed. And it's like, look, they're objectifying these women.
You said unga bunga.
And I said, oh, I don't watch as much TV as you, I guess, because I've never seen anything like this. But you know, that I said, oh, that seems bad. Didn't really think about it at the time. And you see that a lot where people say, oh, you shouldn't objectify women, all this in video games and advertising and everything else. So I didn't realize, but there's this idea, I think it's critical theory, actually, which is that media creates culture. So you have movies where you objectify women, then men start objectifying women. You have movies where you like capitalism and money and happiness, then people will start liking capitalism and whatnot. So you have these movies that are very materialistic, and you'll make society materialistic. So the way to change society is to
change the media.
Change the media. And so that's what you see now is everything sucks.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what are they doing? Don't they know this is terrible? And I think what they're doing, and once I had this sort of realization, I think it makes a lot more sense. They don't care how good the movie is. Because the movie's only bad in the frame of our culture. They want to create the new culture through the TV. But what I think critical theory, if I'm correct, which I believe this is critical theory, gets entirely wrong, is that the entire media is actually based on the culture.
Yeah.
We put these scantily clad women in advertising because we want to see scantily clad women. We have movies about virtue and money and materialism and love and whatnot.
We like those.
We like those. We have movies about individualism because we're like, yeah, that's what a good person is. So all you do when you create these movies is you make the movies suck. When you create these propaganda pieces, because they're not true. The movie has to come from the culture, not the culture from the movie. And it suddenly makes everything make a lot more sense if you look at it that way. They're trying to colonize the world and destroy society. Like this has been the goal of communists for quite a while now, actually, which is to. Like, actually, it's written down in their books. They want the destruction of society. Because their problem, it's written explicitly about America, is that America is so nice and everyone is so wealthy, there will never be a communist revolution. So we have to undermine the stability and happiness of the people so that they're willing to revolt and form communist utopia. Because essentially, they'll always be stuck in this happy purgatory, slightly below utopia.
Slightly below, because I was thinking... Don't they see paradox if they're just happy anyway? So,
but the working class isn't, because they're oppressed even if they don't realize they're oppressed. So the big brain elites have to come in and make their life worse, so they realize how bad their life is. So they're actively trying to warp and destroy values. And so when Jordan Peterson, he has these crazy rants on Twitter. He used to before he got banned. Where he says these Marxists are trying to subvert the standards of beauty, and it makes people go, what's wrong with him? Like, why is he so crazy? He's not. This is what they actually want to do. Now...
Well, someone actually pointed something out interesting, though, about him going slightly crazy now. It's one of his closer friends. You died twice.
That interview with that author.
Yeah, and his friend. The three of them together.
No, the author is his friend. The guy that wrote the 72 Rules for Life in his mystery novels.
Yeah, but they have a friend with it.
Yeah.
But there's three of them.
But that mystery author is like one of his best friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I said you died twice.
Yeah, no, that was a really interesting interview because the author was just hitting Jordan Peterson with all these criticisms that were really good.
Yeah.
And Jordan Peterson, I don't think actually had an answer to some of them.
Yeah.
I do, but the thing that the friend didn't realize and that Jordan Peterson does, or maybe they do realize but they didn't express properly, these are intentional attacks against the stability of society. They are trying to tear down society to enact the communist revolution.
Well, that's why he is pressing so hard on saying that people still haven't recognized that communism is as bad, if not worse, than fascism. Yeah. And
he's despairing because he's saying what is true, and people are looking at him like he's a crazy conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
Now, what I think Jordan Peterson is doing wrong is, you have to You can shout the truth.
Well, if you've seen his address to the Twitter CEO,
No, I haven't. But
he's speaking so calm. He's being like, even he did that experiment once. Like, I'm going to try to speak calmer.
yeah, I think that worked really well.
Yeah, he's even more like he might be too calm in this thing. Like some of his words, like he can be nasty in the way he writes and talks to people, like very cutting. But he's speaking so calm in it that you're like, how can you be seeing these things about someone while speaking that calm?
I don't think tone of voice is everything. I think you have to, if you want to convince anyone of anything, you have to speak from their point of view. You do not have to say, oh, you stupid, like calmly, you stupid Twitter people are communists. That doesn't matter. What you have to say is, you have been subverted by a small group of people who are trying to destroy society. Here is why. This is what they are doing. You have to, like, I see that you really care about people and want to help them. This is not the way to help them.
Yeah.
You have to come at them from their own viewpoint.
So
you can't preach to the choir, or otherwise you'll get no converts.
we've talked sort of about this before. And I've had this idea for a long time that a person in pain, a bad person in pain, spreads their pain to other people. And, like the crippled god.
Yeah.
He inflicted his pain on other people, and it was his blessing. But, so the concept of victim, like, you can be, we've talked on this a lot, you can be a victim, or you can be strong. And so, there's a sort of, like, gross kind of vileness to being a victim. Like, oh, poor me. Do you think it's worse to make other people victims? Like, you're not even if you're the one attacking them, but you're just saying that they are a victim. Like, forcing other people and convincing them that they are victims.
I think it's
like on the same level.
I think it's worse in some ways, but I think it's the same process. You can't claim victimhood for yourself because you even in your corrupted state of wanting to be someone that other people have to serve, you realize that you are actually totally fine. So instead, you find other people to be your victimhood for you. So you're being a victim by proxy, I think. So I think that is worse because you're attempting to be a victim when you have nothing wrong with you.
Do you know the thing about all the I think it's the second wave or third wave feminists? Do you know what happened with all of them? So there's all these women who are very big in the feminist scene, like right around getting the vote.
Yeah.
Like that wave. Where they're saying like, oh, women should be independent. Sorry, not that one, but the wave of feminism are like sleep around with a bunch of different men, like be on equal level. Like that.
Oh yeah.
All those feminists who did that.
They're like, oh, we're wrong.
Yeah. Well, not only we're wrong. They're all married, have children.
Do you know about the Chesterton principle?
No.
If you see a fence, you should know why it's there before you tear it down.
Yes.
And I think that we have now demonstrated very clearly what they said, that the second wave feminists said was wrong. And so now society from now on will be like, okay, we have that lesson. But what I think probably happened was 10,000 years ago, this was already figured out. And so they said, here's the rule. And we threw out that rule without understanding what it was there for. And then we had to learn the lesson again. And we keep doing this with all sorts of things. Have you seen where these people, they become so woke, they become like super hardcore conservatives?
Yes.
Again and again and again. They're like, monogamous marriage, you must have, like, it's weird what happens sometimes. And I think what they're doing is they're deconstructing and reconstructing why we have these things, which is great. You should remember why these lessons exist. But you shouldn't bring society down with you while you're exploring.
Yes. There's a reason why experiments are contained.
Yeah, you should, we have this ability to write and to think. And so you should create stories that ask, like Terry Pratchett did, what happens if we tear this down? And at the end of the story, you have to say, that's why we don't. Mm-hmm. And Terry Pratchett, I think, did an okay job of that. But he tore more down than he built up, unfortunately.
Well, so, that story I was telling you about, one of the goals I have with it is I'm going to be using classical fantasy creatures.
Yeah.
It's not the fact like, oh, fairies were like this or whatever, but no, like taking sort of from first edition Dungeons and Dragons, the very
they're much more real. They're much more powerful.
That version of fantasy, like from there. So like, goblins are these horrible little creatures. Orcs are the pig-faced monsters. Vampires burst, even though if Bram Stoker's original didn't, vampires burst into flame in the sun, right? There is no good vampire. Like, no, that whole sort of line of logic, part of the goal is that is very black and white. It's humanity that's the colors in between. But in the story, the way I want to write it, and I've already started, is it's not so much like, oh, only Sith deal in absolutes, but goblins are evil. It's not that, oh, they're raised this way. It's, we have our structure of morals. You look at Ant Hive, they're going to be so alienly different to us that if ants were giant and sentient, I still don't think we could really communicate with them. And so that's all the other fantasy creatures are on such an axis, like even if it's a couple degrees, that's enough to like, yeah, they're evil or they're ethereal or like the elves or whatever. Like, and I want to use the classical because, like you said, they are really real.
I think the other part of that is 5th edition has all these crazy creatures that don't exist. And I find that very hard to get into. Whereas 1st edition, orcs, goblins, elves, they're real.
Yeah.
Because they've been with humans for hundreds or thousands of years. And if you throw an elf into your book, you instantly give it 1,000 years of backstory.
Yes.
Which is very hard for a author to do if they make up their own creature. Your creature will almost never be on par. The only creature I can think of that might stand a chance that is being created and is on par is orcs.
Hobbits.
They're in mythology to a degree. Hobbits. So
they're real. You go into the English countryside, you'll see them bumbling about. Yeah. They're just a little bit bigger.
Yeah, they're in the Shire. Haven't you?
Well, I'm just referring, they're in the Shires.
No.
I'm just talking about the English country folk.
Yeah, these creatures exist. And even orcs are based on Draugr, so they're kind of already there.
But I really want to make it a goal in writing this urban fantasy to not subvert the mythologies.
I think Dresden Files actually does good with that.
No, they do good.
They do quite good there. Where I find... Okay, so World of Warcraft, they have elves with these ears that are like a foot long.
Yeah.
And some people really into that. Like, they're everywhere. You can see... There's mods on Nexus for Skyrim to give your elves those ears. And Short Fat Otaku was talking about how he wanted the elves in Lord of the Rings to have that. I hate it.
You know?
I hate it so much.
In all of Tolkien's writings, there's 4 mentions of elves having pointed ears. But we know elves have pointed ears.
Yeah, because they're elves. They have them. Yes. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, does he say the dwarves are short at any point? I don't know, but they're dwarves.
Yes.
Although, funnily enough, dwarves are shapeshifters, so they could have been any height, really. But
it's actually interesting that Tolkien had the dwarves driven out by a dragon, and the greatest enemy of the dwarves in Lord of the Rings are dragons. Because a lot of the times, dwarves and dragons are actually quite linked in the Norse mythology as being one and the same.
Yeah, well, but the dwarves in Norse mythology are also, like, what's the dragon's name? Siegfried's slave.
Fafnir?
Fafnir. Fafnir was an evil dwarf.
Yeah.
There are good dwarves.
Actually, one of the really interesting things in 5th edition D&D, and these also exist in old editions, the Drugar dwarves are evil dwarves in Dungeons and Dragons. So the Drugar have 2 powers. One is they can turn invisible, and the other is they can turn into a giant.
That's kind of a nice little touch.
Yeah, and so the Drugar, the evil dwarves, are actually really close to the dwarves in Norse mythology.
And I don't even think they have to be black and white, like you said. Like, Medusa is a very tragic figure.
Yeah.
She's evil, but she's tragic.
Yes.
And the Gorgons in general are tragic.
I'm more referring to, like, the goblins are irredeemable. That's sort of like...
Yeah. There's...
Like, the other myth creatures, like you say, if I was to add the Medusa somehow, because I still want it to be slightly my own.
You're not going blank slate John Locke on all your creatures.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not doing well, actually, vampires sparkle and they drink memories and emotions, and werewolves actually turn into a beast when you give them silver.
Yeah. But what you can do, which is interesting, is if you can change the myth in a way that redefines what was already there.
Yeah.
So, for example, you can say that like boxing wolves are actually their belts, not their underwear. Like what Dresden Files did. They have belts of wolf pelts, not underwear of wolf hides or whatever. And so you take a myth that was the people misunderstood, but it still doesn't deny the myth at all. It just...
What's funny is even my approach to goblins...
maybe that wasn't a good example, but along those lines.
Goblins are the main antagonists of the very beginning of the story.
Yeah.
But these are not like, ooh, the fairy goblins, like those tricksters, and they're not quite the Lord of the Rings goblins. They're the mix in between of the sort of like, they're kind of fey, but they're also these awful short little green men that are just vile.
Here's an example. In Lord of the Rings, the dwarves as a species have been corrupted to be obsessed with gold.
Yes.
But in the legends, that was Fafnir.
Yes.
And several other dwarves that were obsessed with riches. So what you can do is you can take the same story and say it in a different way. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you don't say maybe you don't even say the boxing wolves are misunderstood as this. Like people saw this but as this. No, it's more like we only ever saw one thing that's there's only one Medusa, but you can make Medusa or Lamia a species based on Lamia and Medusa. Right. You can say, well, here Lamia are a species of snake women who eat children. Yeah. But there was only one Lamia. And she might have not even been a snake, but the sort of cultural mythos has made her a snake. And Medusa was just a single woman, but now she's a species of snake woman again who paralyzed people. Yeah. And the snakes, I'm not even sure. Like that's Cilia more, really. So I'm not sure where that. Maybe there was. I thought she's just ugly. I'm not sure where the snakes come in.
Well, I mean, it's pretty ugly if your hair is snake.
Yeah. I'd have to try to find the myth and read it, I guess, to see if she actually had snake hair or something.
Yeah. Well, who would have known? If you looked at her, you'd turn stone.
And then you get something really weird, like the Catapass, the bull that poops flaming feces. Mm-hmm. And D&D, through a typo, called it a Gorgon. And then, Here's My Magic thought that they used a D&D manual rather than a mythology to make their game. And so they have Gorgons are bulls, and
it's epic.
You suddenly create a new mythology. Yeah. And that's interesting. I don't know if that's good, but it's interesting. Yeah. Here's My Magic, they also use Star Wars. They use the Rancor to make their behemoths. And
now that I see that, yep.
And it's kind of odd because it feels right, but it was based on
a giant hippo.
I think the artist is just really good. But it's and that is the thing that when people this is like mirror mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all, right? That isn't what the Disney movie said. It said magic mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all. Yes. And I think that the misremembered version is correct because it's better. If every single person remembers it differently, it's because the things that are easiest to remember are the things that are most true, that resonate. Because if something resonates with you, right, you don't have to remember it. You just have to keep the pattern resonating with you. Well, and so the great thing is Disney got it wrong because the original was mirror, mirror on the wall.
Well, I think my favorite one, and I've told you about this before, is Armstrong's speech.
One small step for man. One giant leap for mankind, but it's one false step for a man.
Yes. And that's why there's that pause. Yeah. The pause is there because he messed up.
Yeah. But what he has said has become...
It's truer.
Truer. And so we say, well, that was a better thing to say. And that is what will be remembered.
Mm-hmm. And even if you actually think about it, it doesn't make one small step for man Unless he's referring to himself as humanity taking the step.
Yeah, I think so. Like, man has taken a physical step, but man has also
taken a giant leap forward.
Taken a step of, look what we can do now.
Yeah.
It's like, all I'm doing is taking one physical step. But what I'm doing with that physical step is proving that I no longer have limits.
Yeah.
We can go anywhere. We can do anything. Mm-hmm. It's probably, as far as we're aware, the greatest thing humans have ever done. Until we discover that, like, the moon was created or something.
Yeah.
And we're revisiting our lost past. That's actually, like, if the Earth was about to be destroyed, right? We have 20 years, notice. Humanity is about to be destroyed, not Earth.
Yeah.
You say, okay, let's build a structure that can withstand everything. Like, nuclear semiotics.
Yeah.
Like, we talked about this. I think the Egyptians kind of figured it out. What you do is you encode math, because math is, it's always going to be there.
Yeah.
And so you...
1 + 1 = 2.
You create a mathematical structure that can't be done by coincidence. You make it massive, so it can't be destroyed.
Yeah.
And you make it so that the mathematical structure... You don't carve on the walls, because the carvings could fade, they could be stolen, whatever. You make it so the entire structure is encoded with the mathematical symbols. And then you... what is a pyramid as well? It's 3 from 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is the secret sign of the Masons? It's a apron with the corner folded up.
Yeah.
And that's 3 from 4, because the folded up corner is a triangle, but the 4 is a square. And 4 is the sign of earth, and 3 is the sign of fire. So you're saying knowledge from the earth, which is the sign of divine knowledge of humanity.
Well,
so
in the proof of math, I mean, I don't know how stable this would be, but basically, so the dots of like degrees of the earth.
Yeah.
Like, try to find the straightest line you could, and at every degree build a pyramid.
Mm. But you don't need to, because the Great Pyramids are at the center.
Yeah.
And
I'm saying that's much simpler than at every degree building a pyramid.
And they align with the stars. And all the Mayan cities align with the stars. Yeah. That's how they found a Mayan city. They're like, wait, there should be one right here based on the stars. And they're like, oh yeah, there is.
No, it's just under the bush.
Yeah. So you say, look, what you do is you say, look, this honking big stone, this isn't an accident. And then what do you do with that? You put in it your absolutely most important bit of knowledge you can. And what is that most important bit of knowledge? And we don't know. We haven't figured it out. But we keep discovering new things about the pyramids. And I wonder if the most important thing was, hey, look, spirituality. Hey, look, sit in the sarcophagus and do drugs. This is our cure for depression, right here. Well, so actually, the initiation rite in the Secret Teaching of All Ages, the pyramids have tunnels and structures in them that perfectly mirror the initiation rite, which is you go into darkness, you die. You go along through darkness, you do the initiation, whatever that might be. Maybe it's doing drugs. And then you come up and you're reborn. Yeah. And so you go along the tunnel and you go up to the Sphinx, which is the sun, because it's Leo. Yeah. And you're reborn as the sun. And so it perfectly represents the most ancient, most pure religion, the structure already. But even if it's just, hey, this is our cure for depression, you just stand in the pyramids and you're good to go. Yeah. Like, if that's what it is, maybe that's what they consider to be the most important thing. Like, what if all the instability, all these different crazies of all sorts that are they don't see God, they don't see meaning, they want to tear down the world out of resentment and hate. What if all you have to do to cure that is stick you in the pyramids? I'm not saying it would work, but what if that is all you have to do?
I have this question for you on that. So, let's say it does that.
Yeah.
You stand in the pyramids, and it actually works.
Yeah.
It just works. It fixes all mental problems. Like, you have to stand in the right spot, maybe like 5 minutes or whatever. I don't know. But you stand there, it fixes all problems. Are some people so consumed by their problem that they'd rather have the identity of that problem than have it fixed?
Absolutely. That's what keeps problems going. Because you have to die.
Yeah.
That is why the initiation ritual is death. That's why you have to die.
That's why you have to go into a giant honking stone pyramid. And that is why all the other pyramids that emulate it are filled with corpses.
It could be. But that's why you have to go into a sarcophagus, probably. But every culture around the world to become a man, you had to die. That was the ritual. You had to stick your hand into the poison nettles. You had to be buried alive. You had to be stuck in a log overnight. You had to be stuck underwater until you drowned and then be resuscitated. You had whatever it might be. It's always been death and then renewal, because you cannot be the same person you were if you want to improve. And that's how you let go of resentment. You die. And
I think one of the most, I don't know, life-changing things that happened to me was dying in Japan.
From words.
Yeah, the ego death.
Yeah. And that's something that gets totally abused, the word ego. You're using it right there. But there's this hippie mumbo-jumbo nonsense of like, you have to be egoless and let go of your ego. No, your ego is your sense of self. If you have no sense of self, you're a horrible, destructive force. You need a sense of self, but it needs to be like the phoenix. You need to be able to renew.
Yeah, it's not you need to let go of your ego. You need to kill it and have it be reborn.
The phoenix is also linked to the pyramids, I believe. That's where it goes to.
Yeah, well, Ra's the phoenix, and he goes into the underworld.
Ra is the mummy, falcon, yeah.
One of the things he is the phoenix.
Dung beetle, yeah.
Because the bird holding the sun.
Yeah. But Ra is the ancient mystery.
Yeah.
Like, the ancient mystery is Ra, right? Because he dies, and then he comes again as the sun. And he dies, and he comes again as the sun. Always.
Yeah.
And so I think... Because I think, you know, there's all these crazy people, and you say, why are they so crazy? Can they stop being so crazy? And yeah, that would be nice. But it could be because they're not getting killed when they're children. Like, because we don't have an initiation ritual. And so it's not a deficiency, it's a mental problem. It's like these people, everyone, like basically everyone on Earth, myself, yourself included, need to die. And
well, you're saying what's the biggest lesson in the pyramid ones could be you need to die.
So the Egyptians,
and it helps you by going into it and dying with the magnetics to get rid of your problems of your mind. Yeah,
it could be that little extra kick you need to, plus the ayahuasca or whatever they had going on. But it could be what you need.
Or just being in a giant stone box inside a sarcophagus, that could be death enough.
Yeah. Or going deep underground.
What if even you put the lid on the sarcophagus for the person in there?
Yeah, well, you probably did back when the rituals were done properly. Because that's how they typically did these things. You'd bury the people.
Yeah.
You might even wrap them up. I don't know. But because you want to simulate death in a lot of these things. Even give them a drug to knock them out, anesthesia, something like that.
I mean, you saw Dr. Johns Hopkins' thing on curing depression? His video? Sorry, not Hopkins. Campbell.
How they don't know about they don't know about serotonin being the cause anymore?
There's a follow-up video he had to it.
Oh, no.
So they've done some more research on what's one of the treatments for depression then that's really being looked into. And it's dosing people with hallucinogens.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, this is something that's been known for quite a while now. But psilocybin. Yeah. One use of psilocybin in your life vastly improves the rest of your life, even if you never have it again, for the entire rest of your life in 80% of people.
The UK is doing clinical trials now, though, for hallucinogens to treat depression. And from their initial studies, it's one dose of the hallucinogen can treat your, like, instead of, I have to like constantly take this medicine or take these injections like the normal ones. Yeah. It's like in the worst cases of depression, I think is one dose, and it's like a contained dose of whatever drug, is enough to basically ward off and get rid of depression for 6 months.
Yeah.
So a dose every 6 months, or the alternative they're looking at is microdosing like once a month instead.
Well, Special K, back in 2015, they found it could vastly improve depression. And they were trying to find a way to isolate the mind alteration effects.
Without giving you hallucinations?
I don't think Special K makes you hallucinate. It makes you look at the world differently. So they're trying to isolate that with from the beneficial aspect. But I really think they're going about this wrong.
Just take the mushroom.
I think that
Not even take the mushroom. Bury yourself in a dirt hole and take the mushroom.
I think the magic mushroom trip, all the hallucinations, that's part of it.
Yeah.
You are seeing. You're because apparently what magic mushroom trips do is they show you the best and worst parts of yourself, and that's harrowing for anyone that's not prepared. Like if you're like, I'm not ready to see the worst part of myself, it'll tear you apart. You'll like be a weeping mess for the rest of your life potentially. It can be dangerous. That they say you got to be ready for it. You got to put your ducks in order a little bit.
I've already had dreams that are like that. Annoy me. Like,
well, that is the thing. I hallucinate like throughout the day, stuff like that. So I'm not sure if I should ever take drugs because
maybe it's telling you should.
Maybe
That's
but it's like it might be. I am actually genuinely afraid of losing my mind if I took drugs because I am already so close to the edge.
Yeah.
Like actually, without trying to sound like an insane person, but I do like already have visions and whatnot. I don't know.
Look, just sit on a crack and huff sulfur fumes.
Yeah. I'm not sure if going that much further would be a good idea.
It's such an obvious message, that one dream was always stuck with me. I was at the bus stop, right in front of the school we went to, the high school. And there's these guys in the parking lot. And they're being kind of jerks, like kind of bullying. And I was just being like, trying to be, oh, I'm so super witty. I'm so much smarter than you. I'm super witty. And then one of the guys, like, super clarity moment, who I was like being super witty to, so, that does basically nothing but annoy whoever you're saying it to. And you're not even being clever. You're just being me as well. If they don't understand it, then it's even missing more of the point. Like, who's the audience watching at the same time? Like, just deconstruct that whole thing of, haha, I'm so witty. Look at me. It's like, that only works for a book character or among friends.
Yeah.
If you're doing it to anyone else, you are being a jerk achieving nothing.
It only works in those bad books about the bounty hunter where they're like, I'm so smart you don't understand.
Or among friends, and some of the friends get it and some don't, and then it's funny.
Who do you think you are, Touchstone?
Yeah, exactly. But even Touchstone works because the audience is observing Touchstone. If there's no one watching Touchstone, he's just being a prick.
And also everyone is Touchstone's friend in the book, right? Like it might be his rivals, but they're like the other jester. He drives insane, I believe, which is quite cruel. But it's sort of like a prank between frenemies. Like he's a rival, but they've known each other for a long time.
Yeah,
and they're both jesters. They're trying to outwit each other.
Yeah, but it's like being witty to prove superiority doesn't work. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. And I woke up from a dream. I was like, what the? Yeah,
dream analysis is super powerful. Jordan Peterson and his friend did that in that video.
Yeah, well, I had another dream recently. Couldn't quite stick with me. Like, it was just last night when I say recently. I can't quite remember it, but there was also a little lesson in there, but apparently wasn't important enough for me to remember it.
I had a dream where I was... I came into this beautiful house, and there was these two beautiful women in there, and the house led out onto this deck with this beautiful view. And it was just the most wonderful feeling of being at home.
Yeah.
And I woke up and I was like, I need to be worthy of that. Because I was not worthy of that place.
I need to be worthy of two women.
Well, they were roommates, and I was visiting their house in the dream.
Yeah.
But it was like, the message was very clear. It was like, I'm not worthy of this place. I need to become worthy of it.
Yeah.
And if you pay attention, you can get all sorts of stuff out of your dreams. And sometimes if you're awake and you're walking and you turn to the right and suddenly the sun opens up and God comes down and there's like golden light and it's like, pay attention. You're like, okay.
So you saw a UFO.
Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about that.
I was just saying, that's there to round all this up.
Yeah, to make me seem sane. So it's kind of a disappointing UFO story, I think, but I'll go into it a little bit. So I was living in a shed, as you do, and I got up in the middle of the night to go pee, so I went outside, and I was walking towards the woods to go pee, and I saw this brilliant orange orb glowing beyond the trees.
Yeah.
What on earth is that? Why is the moon so bright? Like, it was much brighter than the moon.
Yeah.
Is the moon so bright? So I decided to walk to the road, and try to get a look, because I thought there is one street light within like, for some reason, it's like the only street light within like 20 kilometers, but it's right where I was looking basically. Yeah. So like, okay, maybe the street light's on. So I walked over to the road so I could see, and it wasn't the street light; it was above the street light. And I was wearing my glasses, clear as could be sky, and no trees in the way whatsoever. So I was staring straight at this thing, and I could see it. Because, you know, when you see, like I saw a bird that looked like it had a 15-foot wingspan, but the angles are hard to judge. It's in the sky. It's like, is it actually that big? Is it not? I heard the shapeshifter. We did that time shift thing, but you can never actually, was that real? Am I imagining it? There's always that doubt, right? There's another supernatural event, actually, that we didn't talk about that you've experienced. We met that angel at the ice cream shop. Do you remember that? Where she was serving ice cream, and it's just this most beautiful woman ever.
I have no memory of this place.
Do you remember we went to the ice cream shop by our mom's office, right?
Yes.
And there was a woman there, and she asked you for your order. She's like, "Hey, what do you want?" And you were just stunned. You're like,
no memory.
Okay, this...
Maybe I was really stunned.
Like the most beautiful woman ever. And I don't mean that in like a, I don't know, Kim Kardashian way or something. Like, you know, all the proportions are correct if you think Kim Kardashian is all the proportions correct. Something like that. I mean like your wife on your wedding day beautiful. Like there was an otherworldly radiance to her that was... like love was radiating off her in a more than beauty in some sense, and it wasn't me, it was everyone. Like you were flabbergasted. You could barely speak. I was
apparently I can't remember it.
Just burned out of your mind.
Yeah.
But she was never seen her since. I don't know what that was.
The one that I remember, which you don't, is we were at Whistler, right? And we were walking down the hill, and you walked by this girl who looked at you, and I didn't observe it. And he said, it was really weird. She looked at me like she knew me.
Was that when we were near the bike shop, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
She looked at me
vaguely
like
remember it then,
she really knew me. And then you went into a bit of an existential crisis that you're like, we're away in a different land, and you lost all our memories. But she remembered, and she's like, she can't communicate you, and so she's just looking at you sadly. And you're like the hero from the Beyonder sort of thing, memory loss.
It's like your name.
Yeah, no, that's actually much. It's like a your name situation for looking at you.
Should have paid attention.
I actually had, so I'm almost certain I knew who this person was, but I knew them when they're at the start of transitioning, and so originally they were a girl, and they're transitioning to be a guy. So I was at the grocery store, and I was staring at this person. Their face is so familiar, but they have a beard, and my brain was just like. But all their facial structures, the way they're talking, the way they're acting, but they're with friends, so I'm not going to go, hey, are you so-and-so?
Is it generational or, like, we're not even a different generation, really. But, like, there is no one my age that's trans. And you have, like, what, 4 people? 5? You include your roommates, siblings, and it's like...
Yeah.
It's crazy. That person that went to college with me briefly.
The bloody... amount other roommates I had in Lethbridge.
Yeah, it's kind of wild.
Yeah.
Anywho, UFOs. So, there's this moment when you see something as clear as can be. There is no denying this.
Yeah.
Because I could see it clear. These 3 orange dots in a triangle. Just floating up in the sky. And I was like... It does something to your brain where you're like, oh, great, I'm going to become the insane person that says, I saw a UFO. I saw it. You have to believe me, and no one will believe me. Like, I had this moment of thought, like, okay.
Please be an airplane. Please be an airplane. Please be an airplane.
There's no doubt now in my mind what I am seeing. And I will never be able to convince anyone of this. And so I have to be quiet about it for the rest of my life.
Or it's the please be an airplane or a weather tower.
Yeah. And so, but no, it was like very bright, very large up in the sky. And I was like, what on earth? And so now some context about the shed area.
Swamp gas.
No, the shed is under a flight zone. Yeah. So there's airplanes always. So you don't... So I saw this, like it was perfectly still, hovering triangle of lights, right? You always hear airplane noise.
Yeah.
So is this perfectly silent hovering thing perfectly silent, or have I just tuned out airplane noise because I'm so used to hearing airplanes? Because there's always airplanes. The second thing is coyotes. When you're going to pee in the middle of the night, you can barely see because there's no light. You're on the lookout for coyotes because you don't want to get ambushed by coyotes because they're very smart animals, and they're not going to attack a human normally, but they have you at a massive disadvantage in the middle of the night.
Especially when you're going pee.
Yeah. And if you're if you're trying to pee in the middle of the woods at night, I don't think coyotes have ever killed someone as far as I'm aware, but
they have.
There's definitely, they're smart guys. I wouldn't put it past them.
Coyotes have killed more people than wolves in Canada.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, North America.
I'm on the lookout for coyotes because, well, they're very smart, dangerous. Maybe not to humans so much, but they are dangerous. And they're also really creepy. Like, it's really scary going out in the middle of the night when they're howling.
Yeah.
So, kind of on edge.
Or laughing.
Yeah. So I'm not really paying attention. You know, always that half devoted, like, is that a coyote? Is that a coyote? Gotta keep an eye out to run back to the shed and hide. So I'm a little distracted there. So I see these 3 dots in the sky, and I'm like, okay, that can't be an airplane because all the colors are the same.
Yeah.
And it's not moving.
And it's not flickering.
And the moment I think that, like, engines start up, I start hearing like airplane engines, and it starts going off to the right, and I see the green and the red and the white tail light, and I'm like, what? Did it hear me? Did it hear my thought? Like, it turns into an airplane.
Yeah.
So the only thing I can think of is it's flying straight towards me, so it doesn't look like it's moving.
Yeah.
And then the moment I go, wait, this thing's hovering, it takes a sharp turn to its left, and I suddenly see it move because it's no longer coming straight towards me. But I don't know why the lights would have been orange, why they would have been so bright, and why I wouldn't have heard it, except that I'm so used to airplane noise, I'm tuning it out. So I'm pretty sure it was an airplane. But that brief moment of clarity is like, wow, if you have that clarity, you're suddenly like, whoa.
I actually had something a bit like that last night. So, I've been going for late night walks. I mean, quite like around midnight sort of thing. And even though I'm walking in a fairly safe area, I walk with a headlamp.
Yeah.
Because wilderness city. We're near wildlife. I want to be able to see it. Also, sometimes there's drunk drivers. So the headlight makes me aware of them. However, I don't want to disturb people because, like, oh, this idiot's walking around down the streets because it's an urban area. So my headlamp's designed for bikers, and you can switch it from red or white light.
Yeah.
So red is very faint, but it's great on reflectors. Like anything that's a reflective surface turns blood red.
And it's way more power efficient.
Yes. Also, like cars, they'll like a guy with a headlamp that'll blind them, but they see this guy walking along with the eye of Sauron on his forehead.
Yeah, they'll notice you.
Yeah, but they won't get blind. They'll avoid me. So, anyways, I was walking down this one area, and it was sort of a situation where I had the white light on because there's not enough street lamps in the area. And I turned my head to look down this one driveway, and there was a black cat sitting there. And it sort of like did that sort of cat flinchy thing of I'm scared, but I'm not going to move. So it flinched, and its eyes lit up in the white light. I was like, oh, I'm sorry about that. So I flicked to the red. So the black cat disappeared, and these 2 evil orbs of red started glaring at me, and I started walking faster to get away from it. Because, with the white light, it illuminates the black cat on the ground. I can see it perfectly. Sure, it's got the shiny eyes, and you know the shiny eyes with the flashlight's a little bit creepy. I did not realize that how much it would reflect the red light, and the cat would just disappear. And, I could still sort of see it as this ball of evil with the glowing red eyes.
I wonder what our mom's dog would look like if we did that.
Well, so I encountered some foxes on another walk, and I shined the red light was on. And I could still partly see them, but it gave them the red eyes. And the foxes, it wasn't so bad because, it reflected off the white of their noses a bit and, the orange of their fur. And so it gave the foxes that sort of hee, but they just had red eyes. So it's they're still just tricksters, heh. But the cat was just, imagine seeing that with, a tiger or something, a tiger's eyes getting reflected.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what our mom's dog is because she's pitch black.
Yeah.
And she's got a really creepy body proportions.
Mm-hmm.
She's very skinny with a very scary looking head.
Yeah, she'd make a good black ship.
Yeah.
Besides her belly being white.
Like she's like one of the QAnon or whatever.
Yeah.
Or the
Well, the same black ship is a black hound.
Right. One of those.
The story of Black Shep, actually one of them is, so there's a wedding going on, and it walked into the church, and it either barked at the bride or bit out her throat, and then when people jumped up in an uproar, the church collapsed and killed everyone inside it. And then the dog walked out.
Oh.
And it's like appeared several times in Scotland. Because it's Black Shep. That's why it's called Black Shep and not Black Hound.
Black Coo.
Actually.
Alright.
Yeah.
Should we wrap it up there?
Yeah, I was just thinking on cats and dogs in Scotland. Where's the pss, 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 pss thing for cats come from? And it said, well, it's interesting because other nations do that. And so it had like the Japanese version, which was like nya 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 nya. And it had like the French version. They had the Scottish version, which is "Come here, you cunt."
All right. Goodbye.